The Battle of the Bastards has quickly become the most popular Game of Thrones episode of all time. It is a perfect 10 on IMDb with far more votes than even Hardhome got. Most episodes get 12 to 15,000 votes. This one has 80,000 as of this recording, and it's only been a few days. 93% of those voters gave it a 10. It's awfully hard to average a perfect score. Even if you're in the minority, as in you didn't care for this episode, you have to acknowledge how hard it is to achieve this kind of popularity. This broke the all-time record on IMDb, set by Breaking Bad's episode Ozymandias, which was phenomenal, by the way, which is also a perfect 10 after 3 years. But it has only 75,000 votes after those 3 years, where this episode has 80 in 3 days. So IMDb, of course, is not the be-all, end-all of ratings. For example, The Dark Knight is the 4th most popular movie according to their voters. I like that movie a lot, to be fair.
With, for comparison, 1.6 million votes.
1.6 million votes, a far a lot more than 80,000. But still, I wouldn't call it the 4th best movie of all time. So you got to take those ratings with a grain of salt. It's a useful piece of data, but those numbers do tell a story. There are other numbers that tell a story, and this is less objective. We haven't found reliable numbers in the cost for this episode, but it would be a shock if it isn't the most expensive episode to date. Not just Game of Thrones, but for TV. It could easily be the most expensive episode of TV filmed ever. Consider this alone. 86 hours of footage, 70 horses, many of them trained, 25 stuntmen, about 500 extras, compared to about 400, 160 tons of gravel, 4 camera crews. I mean, the scale of the production was larger than Hardhome or Blackwater, and that's just this battle, because there was Marine also. That didn't even include Marine, although a lot of that was CGI. But still, that's expensive stuff. So on one hand, spending a lot of time and money doesn't guarantee quality. Just spending a lot of money doesn't mean it's going to be good. On the other hand, it certainly helps, especially when you're aiming for awe. And I was awed, no doubt. What about you guys?
Yeah, I loved it. Obviously, I'm on the episode.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm not, as you might guess, I'm not a big battle fan in general. I'm not big on action. But that was just a really visceral, intense experience of a TV show.
Yeah, right on. What about you guys? Welcome back, Radio Westeros. Lady Gwyn and Yolkboy, good to have you here again. Tell us your overall thoughts, your initial impressions.
Yeah, hello. Good to be back. It was epic, obviously. Awesome in the true sense of the word. It was, really don't have much bad to say about it in terms of spectacle. So.
What about you, Yolkboy?
Hi, really glad to be back. Yeah, it was a wonderful spectacle. It was groundbreaking TV. I thought maybe some of the underpinning story was a little weak in places, but this was a spectacle episode, wasn't it? So we've got to give them points for delivering the awe, and they really did that. Absolutely.
And also, I want to mention a few things before we get started. We've got a couple of notes. This is... Despite it being a battle episode, there is plenty of plot movement. Lots of things happen. There's lots to talk about besides just the scale of the production and how popular it was. And I want to give a quick shout out to our History of Westeros Patreon dragon writers. Lord Mark Joseph, the Snow in Winterfell, is the writer of Mazalacartho, a white dragon with green scales, horns, wings, and claws, which we will eventually have an image for. Also, Rory the Subduer and Tamer of the Last of Valyria, writer of Vrathraeus. Vrathraeus, excuse me, that's a hard name to say. A silver gold dragon with violet eyes, talons, and horns, as in the colors of old Valyria themselves. I like that. Vrathraeus was found already part grown by Rory amidst the ruins of Valyria. Also, a shout out to First Sword Jeff Gnarly, the Long Slapper. Sorry. First Sword Jeff Gnarly, the Long Snapper. First Sword of History of Westeros. Excellent. I also want to remind everybody that we're doing a live Q&A tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll have plenty of... You guys have sent us a lot of great questions, and there's no way we can cover them all today. We knew that would be the case, so we're going to set aside some extra time for that tomorrow. And a good chance we'll do something else at the end of the season. After this big episode coming next week, it's going to be 69 minutes long, and of course it's the end of the season. Lots of things always happen then. So there'll be more questions after that, and we'll be around to field them. Also want to mention something very, very cool that we're extremely excited about. Eventually you'll see it behind us in some form or another in some of our episodes. The new Michael Clarfield, as in claradox.de, His new map is out. It's a giant Essos map. It's totally free. You can download it for free, print it out however you want. It's really incredible. We're going to post a link in the comments below to see his introduction. He made a short video explaining how to get it, the process of making it, and you get a shot of it.
He's doing something very cool where for a small fee, because obviously he has to host the large files, for a small fee you can download the large PSD of it, and you can put your own gods and goddesses along the top. You can change the language to Dothraki or to German or to whatever. You can really change it all, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's a downloadable and editable. You can download it for free. You only have to pay if you want to edit it, and that's just to pay for his hosting fees. He's not making any profit off of it. It's just to cover his expenses. So it's a really wonderful thing to give to the community. It's beautiful. And thanks a lot, Michael, for doing that for everyone and for all your hard work. He put a lot of work into it, as you'll see in the video if you watch it. And I highly recommend that you do. But that's all we have for announcements. So let's get into it. Let's start with where the episode started. In general, we only have 2 locations to discuss. Usually we go location to location. It's a little easier this time. So Marine, of course, start off with Dany and Tyrion. Tyrion mentions Jaime's wildfire story, which hints that Cersei's "I heard a rumor" is just her way of talking to Qyburn and not saying that it's actually a rumor. She heard it from Jaime. Tyrion clearly heard it from Jaime as well. So Jaime telling Cersei and Tyrion the truth about Aerys, it makes sense, of course, but that's not how it is in the books, is it?
Yeah, personally, I don't think book Jaime has told Cersei or Tyrion about the truth behind killing Aerys in the wildfire. I just got the impression that in the bathhouse scene with Brienne, this was the first time that Jaime had told anyone, and that's why it's monumental for Jaime in his trust of Brienne and so pivotal for triggering his redemption arc, because it's the first time he's trusted anyone, etc. Remember that as close as Jaime and Cersei are, or were, there's still huge secrets between them. Cersei doesn't seem to have told Jaime about the Valancourt prophecy, which has surely tormented her as much as Jaime's wildfire secret has tormented him.
Yeah, and just to jump in real quick, that's a great point to bring up the Valancourt, because she does tell Jaime about the Valancourt prophecy in the show, but not in the book. So both of these things are parallel. In the show, she knows they both know each other's secrets. In the books, they don't know either of each other's secrets. So that's a very interesting distinction. And I know, Lady Gwyn, you had some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I agree with what Yolkboy was saying, and I think, isn't that the point of Jaime's and Cersei's arcs in the books, that they've kept these massive secrets from each other, and in the end, it seems very possible that that's what's going to lead to their mutual destruction, at least, according to some theories. So I'm definitely of the opinion that Cersei doesn't know why Jaime killed Aerys, and incidentally, she definitely doesn't seem to know that he killed Rhassart, which would imply that she's ignorant of the wildfire plot. And Tyrion, in books, almost certainly doesn't know. When he talks to Helene in Clash of Kings, Helene tells him about the stalk of wildfire from Aerys' reign. There's a quote, "By rights, they ought to have been destroyed, but so many of our masters were murdered during the sack of King's Landing. The few acolytes who remained were unequal to the task, and much of the stock we made for Aerys was lost. Only last year, 200 jars were discovered in a storeroom beneath the Great Sept of Baelor. No one could recall how they came to be there, but I don't need to tell you the High Septon was beside himself with terror." Now, there's a lot there that has to do with Tyrion's brother, Jaime, and Tyrion does not have a single thought that indicates that he knows about the plot, or the presence of the caches, the deaths of the pyromancers at his brother's hand. In spite of the fact that he later thinks King Aerys used his pyromancers to roast the flesh off his enemies, his brother Jaime had told him a few stories about the Mad King. I don't think there's really any evidence that in Tyrion's or Cersei's thoughts that Jaime ever shared quite all of the information with them in the books.
Yeah, the key phrase there, the key mention in that quote you just listed there was the Great Sept of Baelor, that in the books Helene mentions that they just found those 200 jars of wildfire. So all the show has to do is say, hey, Helene and his guys never found those jars in show canon. So there you go, and that's all they need to set that up.
Proof.
Very interesting. Yeah, we'll have a few more things to say about the Wildfire plot. As usual, we'll be discussing trailer spoilers after the credits, so we may have a few more things to say about that. We may not. It would be a spoiler of its own just to say that we're going to talk about it more, in a sense. Maybe. So now Tyrion mentioned something else very important, and this also could relate to the books. He's basically saying that by managing the city well, without slaves, and by showing that it can prosper and work, that will set an example that no masters are needed. I wonder if, of course, it's also punctuated with the threat of the dragons at the end. It's like, well, it was making it work. Plus, look what happens when you stand up to the dragons. So it's these two things that work together. And it sounds like the books could go similar in that regard. It makes sense for how she will leave Meereen, with the threat of the masters having dealt them a serious blow and trying to show Meereen as like a beacon of change. You guys think that might go the same way in the books?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what she is trying to do. She has to set this example.
Yeah, it's interesting too because she's just not there yet. She's in the book. She's made. We don't know when she's going to get back. The timing of like what's going to happen. Maybe she'll come back and it'll be similar. The Battle of Fire will have gone badly, but of course the Battle of Fire is about to play out in the books, and Dany doesn't seem like she'll be back in time for that. So there'll be a lot of differences, but it could wind up in the same place. So let's talk about Daenerys talking to the Masters with her teammates there, Team Dany. As I said, this will obviously play out much differently. This is kind of simplistic the way they're handling it here. It's obviously very complicated in the books, all the politics. Some people just don't even like it. It's too complicated for them. The Myrrhe's not, isn't in the show.
It is. There's a sexier Myrrhe's not in the show.
You're right. There is a Myrrhe's not. It's something else entirely. I totally forgot about that. It's hilarious. Yeah, Dario brought that up, right?
The Myrrhe's not?
Yeah,
No.
Who brought that up?
That was at the King's Landing brothel. There was a woman with the
okay.
Myrrhe's not.
That's hilarious. Yeah, you're totally right. So it's the same point, though. The Myrrhe's not in the show is much, much simpler than one of the books. So it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just a much simplified version. Now, I'm not complaining about making it simple. It's just understandable. They don't have time for all the Myrrhe's politics that's in the books. So I don't blame them for skipping over it. So they got to do what they can. And I think it was a fine job. It was certainly a spectacle. As for the Battle of Fire itself, as we said, it's going to be a lot different book to show, but good place to mention that both of our shows have a Battle of Fire episode. That is, both History of Westeros and Radio Westeros have done a Battle of Fire episode.
That's right. Combined, we have more than 3 hours of Battle of Fire for you, so if the brief treatment in the show disappointed you, I think we've got it covered.
I think so. Now, a couple other underlying themes here. Dany seems to have a pretty solid control over Drogon at this point. He knows how to let her climb on. He didn't spit flame until he was told to. Seems like he flies nice and smooth to keep her from falling off.
Viserion and Rhaegal, too.
Yeah, Viserion and Rhaegal, too, because they were all very just following the leader there. Now, it'll be interesting to see this play out in the books. I think it will happen a lot in early parts of The Winds of Winter as she gets a little more control. We've already seen some of it. Dany's already has some thoughts on how Drogon responds differently than a horse would. Like when you dig your heel into one flank, the horse goes the other way. But when you dig your heel into the flank on the dragon, it goes that way. It's attack versus predator versus prey response type of thing. So it's already started in the books. It's very interesting. I think we can see that grow. So what I want to bring up is the idea of Tyrion building dragon saddles has been foreshadowed in the books very heavily, and it's also been mentioned in the show. Now, we haven't seen any movement towards that goal. Dany doesn't seem to need a saddle. Frankly, Dany has been riding her dragon in the books without a saddle either, so that doesn't mean we won't get it. It just hasn't happened yet. So it's a good thing it's a small point, but something to think about. It might be something that still happens. The capturing of the slaver fleet, I think that's also something that will probably happen in the books. Slaver fleets are crewed by slaves, after all. They could rise up, something along those lines.
Oh, yeah. We definitely expect the Volantene fleet will rise for Dany. That is the huge fleet that's on the way. And it certainly is not out of the question that the Yunkish and the Carthene and the Giscari ships that are already there in the blockade might do as well, especially now with the Iron Fleet penning them in, the dragons are in the sky, the tide of battle is turning, and if they're just following the example of the Volantines, she could end up with a huge, absolutely huge fleet.
Yeah. Yolkboy, what do you think?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk overall about the kind of Myronese scene and the action and stuff. To me, it felt incredibly rushed, especially after the kind of snail's pace of the plots been going forward this season. There was the bombardment of the pyramids, the negotiations with the masters, Dany flying off, Viserion and Rhaegal escaping, the dragons roasting a ship, and the Dothraki riding down the Sons of the Harpy. And this was all in quick succession. I think despite the rushed feeling, the visuals were absolutely stunning. It was very exciting, especially the dragons and the fire cannons in the battle. And the whole thing looked awesome, and it was very enjoyable. And the man hours put into making this episode into a kind of blockbuster must be astonishing. I'm actually glad that Meereen took these leaps forward. What I said about it being rushed, I think it needed to be rushed at this stage. I'm glad that it's reaching a conclusion. It hasn't exactly been the best place the show's gone to, with some faltering and weak storylines, I think. But with a solution to the Masters and Dany's transportation, I'm really hoping that Dany will be ready to set sail very soon at last.
It's shades of Arya's plotline. Some people weren't happy with the time spent in Meereen and are kind of just ready for it to be over. Well, looks like it's about to be, so if you didn't like Meereen, well, there's your silver lining. It's just about done with. There'll be probably a little more next episode. They're not just going to get on ships and leave right away, but it's coming soon, I think, very soon.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's her last shot of the season, is them on those ships.
That would be awesome.
Great if they get out of there this season.
Sailing into the sunset, or towards the sunset? Yeah, same difference. So now we get the anticipated Dany, Theon, Ashaya, and Tyrion scene. We had some predictions for what might get discussed. Some of that could still happen. We didn't have Tyrion talking about Sansa yet, but we'll get to that in a minute. So what about this deal that she makes with Asha and or Theon under different circumstances? I don't see Asha and Theon going to Slaver's Bay in the books. But let's say fast forward a bit, Dany starts to make her moves in Westeros. Things are going well. You know, Euron is clearly a villain. She figures that out one way or another because it's kind of obvious. One way or another, she'll realize that maybe. And maybe down the line that could happen. You know, they meet in Westeros. Asha says, "Hey, I'm the one who wants to make the Ironborn, you know, different." So, Lady Gwyn, you actually have a quote that speaks directly to this.
Oh yeah, in Feast for Crows at the King's Moot, Asha promised the Ironborn a new way of life. So here's the quote there. She says, "Peace, land, victory. I'll give you Sea Dragon Point and the stony shore, black earth and tall trees and stones enough for every younger son to build a hall. We'll have the Northmen, too, as friends to stand with us against the Iron Throne. Your choice is simple. Crown me for peace and victory, or crown my nuncle for more war and more defeat." So, in spite of the fact that she's talking about standing against the Iron Throne in the books, there's a precedent for Asha saying that she's going to lead an Iron Man to something new, which is very similar to what we saw in this scene with Dany. So, it could definitely play out that way.
Watching her and Patreon supporter Anthony Gonzalez asks or suggests the possibility that Theon could take over some of Barristan's role, not in terms of fighting, but in terms of being a bridge from Targaryen to Stark regarding Daenerys. As in, Daenerys still regards the Starks as usurpers, or helpers as the usurpers' dogs, and she doesn't know, like we all do, that Ned Stark was a really good guy, a really honorable man that didn't, you know, just rebel for power or ambition. So Barristan, we know Barristan thinks very highly of Ned Stark, so we know that there's a good chance that Barristan is the one who's going to maybe explain this to her and say, look, Ned Stark wasn't a bad guy, blah, blah, blah. Theon can take over that role. Makes a lot of sense. I really like that thought, Anthony. Good job. I think it could absolutely go this way. In fact, I would call that a good prediction, and I'll back that one myself. I think...
Couldn't Tyrion could have also talk up Ned a little bit?
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know that. It's interesting to consider what Tyrion's regard for Ned would be. I'm sure it would be mostly positive, but that's a good point.
He
certainly
knows
doesn't
he's
know him as well as
honorable.
Theon. Yeah, absolutely. That's true. He could speak that. He could back Theon up maybe on that. He's like, yeah, I've heard that Ned was a good guy too. Yeah, that'll be interesting if that happens.
I had a minor point, but I took notice of the fact that Daenerys got a new dress
Nice.
between when she fought them and met with Yara and Theon. She's got like a really Grecian-looking dress, or I imagine it being like Valyrian.
They do sometimes. There is a lot of times meaning to the change of dress and clothing, and
for Daenerys in particular, they put for all of them, but I think they put a particular amount of thought into her clothing, like from how she wore blue for so long, which drove a lot of us crazy, but was because she was supporting her Dothraki side of things, because of Khal Drogo, that was his color, and for when she wore white for her purity and for ruling there, and now she's into this green Grecian robe-like dress. Anyway, so
nice.
what significance? I think it just shows her being very regal.
Yeah, and you could see the regality when she interacted with the Yara. She was like, "What is this outstretched hand? What do I do with this?
Yeah, she was.
I shake it."
Yeah, she was really robotic and slow and very comedic.
Yeah, that was funny. That was a good moment. She's like, people kneel before me. I don't. What is this thing? What is she doing? That was pretty funny. I like that. So yeah, definitely still possibility of Theon telling Tyrion about Sansa. I guess that could come later. Maybe that will help ease things between them a little bit. Tyrion obviously isn't a big fan of Theon at this point, although I'm sure, I think the way that scene went, Tyrion probably has a little less anger towards Theon than he might have. I think he probably has a little more respect than he did initially.
It wasn't really clear to me. I don't think that they tell them. I don't think they tell them that Theon doesn't have his penis anymore.
They don't.
They keep it under wraps.
Yeah, he says, "Does it look like you've suffered?" And they don't bring up, well, actually, if he just could drop trow real quick and show, does it look like I've suffered now?
I was thinking of Tyrion making a joke about, if I could tell you how many men without a penis had insulted my height. Because, Grey Worm, Varys.
That's true. It just goes back to that. So, what is next for this? As we said, there's a few things we can discuss based on trailers, but there's a lot we can predict without taking the trailers into account at all. I mean, Dany going to Westeros is fairly obvious, but there's still a lot of logistics left, right? The Red Priestesses are still there. That's still kind of up in the air exactly how that's going to play out, whether she's going to bring a lot of them with her or not. And who's going to be in charge of Meereen when she leaves? Is she going to leave Missandei behind or something like that? I don't think she'll leave Tyrion behind. He knows Westeros too well. That would be, and he's just such an important, prominent character. Writing him out like that seems really unlikely. It's got to be possible.
Yeah, I feel like Missandei is the best choice, except for the fact that she's not all that respectable by the common people, really, and she's with Grey Worm, so that would mean Daenerys has to ask Missandei and Grey Worm to split up, and Grey Worm's not going to stay there, so...
I wouldn't think so either, yeah.
I don't know. I really don't think Missandei is all that likely. Yeah, but I really don't think there's a better option.
Yeah, there is no other. They just don't have, like, these extra characters that can stick in charge. Like, maybe they have some of the freedmen take over. I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't... I'm curious to see how they'll resolve that. They may just kind of gloss over it like they do with the Kingsguard and some other things.
They wave at that not peasant, the lowborn man that survived.
That guy, the teacher guy.
Walked out. No, the one that.
Oh yeah, the one that the slaver that was left.
I don't know his name. Yeah. Razdal is one of them. I know. I don't remember the other two though.
Yeah, the one who was not killed by Grey Worm.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's. Do you guys have any other thoughts on Meereen, or should we move on? A lot to come still, so maybe we can.
All right.
We'll have to see. We need to see the rest of the season to make our best guesses, but y'all might have something important to say that I forgot to bring up.
No, most of what I have to say will be covered in the overall thoughts at the end of the episode.
Great. All right. Well, let's go on to the north. We'll start with the pre-battle stuff, many scenes that happened before the actual battle. A lot of these were very meaningful and important. They're setting up some things for the actual battle and for past it, more importantly. We'll start off with the parlay between Jon, Sansa, and Ramsay. Also, little Lyanna was there and a few others, but they didn't have any speaking lines. But she got to frown. Yeah, she was mean mugging. That was a good mean mug. I want to see her on her own TV show. So, question I have, Interesting. We see Jon and Ramsay interacting. This is a really big deal. Are they ever going to interact in the books? They haven't to this point, and I wonder if they ever will.
I don't know. It's hard to say. It seemed like they were about to be interacting.
Yeah.
In the books, but now, it's with Jon's seizuring, it's very hard to predict. I wouldn't be surprised. What I liked about this scene is that Jon was clever enough to get Ramsay to show his true stripes, that he's a leader, not willing to fight for his own men. But then he turns around and underestimates him, fails to heed Sansa's warning, and ultimately kind of pulls a Ned Stark, and his honor and devotion to his family going to end up getting him in trouble.
Yeah, only luck saved him there. And being immune to arrows, apparently.
Right.
Now there's some planning, which is an important scene here. There's Jon, Davos, and Tormund. Mostly Jon and Davos talking, and Tormund having things explained to him, which was done in a humorous way. Same question that I have about Jon and Ramsay. Will Jon and Davos ever interact in the books? Good question, I guess. Certainly seems they've interacted a lot in the show. It's easy to forget that they have not interacted in the books at all.
Mm-hmm. We predicted in one of our episodes, or the North Remembers, that Davos and several other people might arrive at the Wall early in Winds in the wake of Jon's stabbing. So you could play out similarly as far as Jon and Davos go, considering the show has changed the sequence of events quite a bit.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah. So
that does make it harder to predict, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to say, where they just made things up, or did they have foreshadowings or knowledges that we don't possess. So, but it's interesting in this council where they specifically mentioned the pincer movement, which was used by Stannis at the Wall to defeat the wildlings, which is the reason it comes up there. Perhaps more significantly, one of the earliest recorded uses of this movement in real life was the historical Battle of Kenai in the Second Punic War. Everybody's been talking about it. We talked about it last night. This actual battle scene drew quite a lot of inspiration from that real-life battle. But of course, here you have Jon reassuring Tormund that Ramsay won't be able to use that maneuver, which we should probably just file away under famous last words.
That's right. It's luck that they weren't his last words, but they will probably remain famous. So then after the battle planning, we have Jon and Sansa arguing about Ramsay's character, and this is a very interesting scene. It's very poignant in some ways. Sansa brings up, why on earth are you not asking me about Ramsay? I know I don't know anything about battles, but his character is really important. His general, the way he's going to behave as a general is tied to who he is as a person. And one of the things I really thought about this, is it's easy to forget how young both of them are. Sansa Jon is really young too. Kit Harington's 29, but Jon is only around 18. Sophie is 19, but she's playing someone that's maybe 15 in the show. It's not clear how old she is, but she's not. I don't think she's 16 yet. And even if she is, that's still really young. So that's all really important when you judge these guys on their actions, meaning Sansa and Jon, and the decisions they make. We'll be talking about it a lot this episode, but it's really, really important to keep in mind how young they are, and that explains a lot of, being emotional, not being able to handle certain traumas and experiences. I mean, they both had horrible traumas. Like, Sansa's been raped repeatedly. Jon was dead. I mean, this is...
To be honest, I think they're 9 and, 30, and it would still be understandable for them to behave in this exact way.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep.
What do you think, Lady Gwyn?
Well, I think, whether people think it's justified or not, they have made a point of showing Sansa's frustration with being ignored when she points out that they need more men and that she hasn't been asked her opinion about Ramsay. And it's worth noting that Sophie Turner commented in an interview that about the inherent patriarchy of Westeros, noting that that's what prevented Jon from initially seeing Sansa as a competent contributor. And she spoke without any hint that Sansa was trying to put one over on Jon or anything like that. She was focused more on the emergence of her female power, which is a theme that we've seen quite a bit in this season.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that I saw people commenting and made me laugh a little bit, but I think there's a counterpoint to it, which is that Sansa says, "You didn't ask me my opinion." Well, he didn't ask Davos and Tormund their opinions, they just gave it. But I think that has to do with the sexism of Westeros, that Sansa doesn't feel that she can just start talking in this war council and give her opinion in front of Davos and Tormund unless Jon asks her opinion there. So I think there's a counterpoint to that. I thought it was a funny comment, though. But I also think that just the effect, as Aziz went into, the effect that Sansa's trauma has had on her is just often a little bit brushed aside. And I'm not just talking about Ramsay, although that's a huge part of it, but just, I mean, her whole life since leaving Winterfell. And I think that, like you said, that's part of why she gets emotional and has this sense of Ramsay planning some sort of trap. I think she's, you know, deep down she has to have this deep-seated panic and fear that this is going to happen to her again. She says to Jon, you need to, you know, I need to die if you lose. Like, not going back to him, basically. And I thought of, during this, I thought of Missandei and Grey Worm when they're talking to Tyrion, who wants to interact with the Masters and make a deal with them, and that's their tormentors, their own tormentors, who put them through horrible traumas, and they warned Tyrion, they warned him, and I'm sure they had that, like, no, the Masters are coming, and they did come, and Missandei said, the Masters have come to take what's theirs, and I'm sure that was a horrible experience for both of them, but then, just like how Sansa got her revenge on Ramsay, Grey Worm was the one to decapitate both of those both of those masters.
That's right. Preach. So. I totally agree with that. The emotional. This is something we focus a lot on in History of Westeros podcast in general, in the past and now, and Radio Westeros. You guys do too. You really, especially when you focus on individual characters like you all do sometimes, or a lot of times, it's really important to get at their psychology. That's a huge driver at people's actions, and I think it's very believable for Sansa and Grey Worm and Missandei to have these strong reactions that from the outside may seem illogical and counter to their interests, but that's trauma. That's how trauma works. It makes you do things that aren't necessarily logical, but they are logical in their own way, in a subconscious sort of way, in that you know better than anyone what the worst case scenario is with these people. They've seen them at their worst. They know what they're capable of. Tyrion doesn't know. Jon doesn't know. He doesn't know. Tyrion doesn't know how bad the slavers can be. Jon doesn't know how bad Ramsay is. And Jon's just like, I've faced worse than Ramsay. I've faced the White Walkers. I've faced, like, yeah, okay, so in some ways they're worse, but they're different worse. You know,
don't toy with you.
Right. The White Walkers don't torture people. The White Walkers don't. Probably, as far as we know, they don't use psychology against you. They just kill, you know? So it's a totally different sort of enemy. So Sansa had a lot of good points there and a lot of good reasons to feel the way she does. So we have a lot more to say about that. Let's take our first quick break, and we'll come back to talk about Jon and Melisandre, which is similar to Sansa's trauma in a sense that she does not want to go back. He doesn't want to go back to what he was at before, just like Sansa doesn't. So we'll be right back. Okay, Jon and Melisandre. Jon tells Melisandre, "Do not bring me back." I think about how that could play out in the books. Will Jon have the same sort of fatalism, like, if I die again, don't bring me back? I don't want that to happen again. What do you think, Yolkboy?
Yeah, I think that we could see a similar thing in the books. Jon kind of fearing to be resurrected again. You know, he's quite mopey anyway, isn't he? But I imagine before a battle, the same kind of line could come about. Just speaking about this scene in general, both Jon and Mel are quite depressed. From Jon, I think we can expect it after what he's been through, and he's always been somewhat solemn, but I think we expected Mel to be a bit more confident after the success of the resurrection. But here she's full of confusion and doubt. Like, we saw her sitting by her fires before she resurrected Jon in that time, and it was a very similar scene, really. She just sat there next to her flames, wasn't she? She's lost her way, and she's even less than complimentary about the Red God, which was a bit of a shocker, I think.
Yeah.
She's obviously still in disbelief about what happened to Stannis, who she thought was a savior, reflecting on her own mistakes in interpreting the flames, which is her kind of reason to be in her own mind, and she just might be feeling guilt about Shireen, I think, which we're going to talk about more today. For book readers, will Mel back off her zealotry and love for the Lord of Light in the books like she did in the show? That's a question to throw out there for you guys.
Yeah, it's not one we can answer. We don't know, obviously, but it's interesting to consider that after, presumably Stannis. It really depends on when Stannis dies in the books. I mean, we don't know for sure that he will. It's a safe guess that he probably will. The circumstances could be a lot different. She may not burn Shireen in the books. It may be Stannis might be the one responsible, or she may do it all herself. It sets up a lot of similar possibilities, but the circumstances are a lot different in which they happen. So, good thing to keep in mind, but it's just a question to throw out there, not one we can actually answer ourselves.
One interesting note here is that that mirror that Melisandre is looking into is the same one from the scene where we see her true self's reveal earlier in the season.
Nice.
I don't know, interesting. But another thing that I noticed during the scene was that I thought that Thoros and Beric's conversation with Sandor about why he was alive mirrored this uncertainty as to what purpose someone is brought back for. Thoros and Beric don't know either what purpose the Lord of Light has, and Melisandre doesn't know.
Yeah, they assume there's a purpose. They assume that there's a deity guiding this, and as much as Melisandre has backed off a bit on her zealotry, she still thinks the Lord of Light is real and in charge, and you can see she doesn't quite love him the way she did. She's like, well, he's the god we have. So it's definitely different, but it's I like the parallel there that you brought up with Beric and Thoros and Sandor not knowing what the purpose is. It's a similar thing. Jon has no idea, Mel has no idea, they're just running with it. So Davos and Tormund have a very interesting conversation. I thought was fairly poignant. They chat about the leaders that they used to follow. Mance and Stannis were very different styles of leadership. They both failed, though. And Jon Snow is not a king, they mentioned. Is that foreshadowing?
Yeah, I think so.
Think so?
Yeah, yeah, it was so pointed. They had to be.
Yeah, definitely.
I also liked Davos's comment that Stannis listened to demons, which created a little confusion with Tormund, who didn't understand the figure of speech. He thought it was very literal. But considering what happens a few minutes later, it's probably not too far off the mark, thinking that Stannis listened to demons, at least from
yes, children burning demons, indeed, or one in particular.
Right.
So. Yolkboy long predicted. We all predicted this pyre scene, finding the pyre. It was kind of shown in the trailers. We talked about it a lot. So, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Davos finding Shireen's stag. A long time ago, at this, in the early season, a watcher called Lady Storch wrote to us and said this. We all loved it, so we all got behind this theory that Davos would find the stag, and it came to pass. I think it was good writing to use the stag as a device over 2 seasons like this. It worked well and was somewhat like Dany's ring, which again linked threads over 2 seasons together and kind of bound them together. And in both instances, it works pretty well. This now sets up a serious showdown between Davos and Melisandre. And it's difficult to see how Mel isn't headed for some kind of serious comeuppance at the very least.
As you mentioned, too, Melisandre may be feeling her own guilt, which may impact her ability to even defend her own decisions. She may be like, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. She may not have the emotional energy to dispute the charge. She may be, I shouldn't have done that.
Because I've always thought that Mel isn't actually evil. She believes what she's doing is right. And she does evil things, but now she's questioning her own faith. She realizes, I've done this terrible thing. I don't think she's so inhuman that she doesn't care about burning a child. It's just she thought that it was going to have great consequences, and it was the God's work. And she realizes now it wasn't. It'd be very interesting to see Mel's demeanor in the next episode.
Yeah, I'm very, very interested in that. I really wonder what they're going to do with that. So. One other note, thanks to Lady Ardros, Mother of Wolves, for catching that the stag burns, which might be a little hint throwback to the direwolf stag foreshadowing way back in season 1, episode 1, where they find the direwolves for the first time and one of the antlers is broken off inside the mother wolf's neck. Possibly intentional, possibly not. Pretty cool catch either way. I like to pretend those things are intentional, even when we don't know they are or not.
Yeah.
And Lady Airdross is one of our Patreon Northern champions, and it's time to give them a shout out. So let's do that. Thanks to J. Wilson, Winters King, Stephen Hill, Bastard of the Crag, Sir Stephen, the Hammer of the North, Small Paul of House Buckley, the Scourge of Skagos, Winters King, Nico the Unknown of House Mormont, Bear Life, Brandon Redbeard of House Brewer, sworn elder of the Zithomancer's Guild and keeper of the Buzz, and the aforementioned Lady Airdross, Mother of Wolves. If you want to get a cool title like that, check us out on Patreon, www.patreon.com/historyofwesteros. Find the title that suits you best. If you want a nickname, make it up yourself, or let us do it for you. Also, you get episodes early, things like that, lots of goodies. So check that out if you get the chance. All right, let's talk about the battle itself. Big stuff. This is the big moment, the big action where all the money was spent, where all the time was spent. Starts off with, well, we threw out a few theories earlier in the season about Frickon, fake Rickon, and Trickon.
Yeah.
Well, the actual it's the track off. Anyway, it was painful, not in the kind of painful that it was bad, but in the painful that no one wanted to see Rickon die. We all kind of saw it coming, but you don't want it to happen. Everyone was yelling zigzag at their screens, even the actor Art Parkinson himself.
Yeah.
Shout out to Lincoln Naranja, the hedge knight from Sothorios, known as the Anaconda Knight, and he mentioned something that is on point as far as the way I like to analyze things, which is the music. And there was a bit of a fake out. It was like a triumphant moment when the last arrow missed Rickon, and the music reflected that, and then bam, he gets killed like a split second later with another arrow, and it was that was tricky of them. Trickon. They trick arrow,
Yeah.
trick arrow, whatever. So
Rickon never actually got any lines this season. They saved some cash there, maybe.
he grunted and moaned and as he's running, made some
And
sounds,
looked
but
defiant.
yeah, this don't count as lines, I don't think.
He's the only person who has less lines than Hodor.
That's funny. So what he said, he tweeted, the actor Art Parkinson tweeted, "Had a good run." Ugh.
Hashtag shoulda zigzag.
Yeah, hashtag shoulda zigzag. So that went viral because that was hilarious. Watching her, Bill Sotheby suggests that the burning crosses were range markers, at least partially functioned as range markers, which is kind of a cool idea. Funny that we all spent a lot of time guessing at who those bodies might be, and it just didn't matter at all. Those bodies were complete nobodies as far as we could tell. So that's funny. There's a bit of a red herring, a flaming herring. Flaming red herring. What do you guys think about Rickon in the books? Is he going to die? Is he a Shaggy Dog story? Let me explain what that means. Shaggy Dog story is an old joke where you just go on and on about a shaggy dog, about it being really shaggy. One version of the joke I heard was where you tell a joke where the guy enters his dog in the citywide Shaggy Dog contest, and the first judge says, "That's a shaggy dog." Second judge says, "That's the shaggiest dog I've ever seen." Third judge says, "That's the shaggiest dog I've ever seen." And you just go on, and you repeat that line for city, state, country, planet, solar system, galaxy. You just go on and on, and the punchline is nothing. It says, finally gets to the universe competition and says, "That's not a shaggy dog." And that's it. You just waste all this time building up a story that's pointless. That's the whole idea. And so George may have been making a joke from the beginning that Rickon's story is not important. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think poor Book Rickon is doomed. Been convinced of that for a long time. There doesn't really seem to be a role for him to play. Recall, he's so young in the books. He's maybe 5 at this point. He was 3 at the beginning. So it's hard not to see that there's just a sly play on that Shaggy Dog trope in George's use of that name for the direwolf.
Yeah, so book readers, brace yourselves. You might be seeing something like that in the book. I don't know under what circumstances it'll happen. It could be much different. I mean, it feels like the Boltons might be partly, if not entirely, defeated by the time Rickon even shows up on the stage.
Yeah.
But That doesn't mean that there's plenty of other ways to die.
1,000 ways to die.
1,001. 1,000 dies in one.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. Jon, let's talk about the charge. So he sees he falls for the trap despite being warned about Sansa, and I don't blame him for that. You know, it's obviously not the best decision. It's a bad decision, but it's, you know, emotionally, given what we talked about before, the trauma he's been in, he's kind of got a death wish. He doesn't really want to be alive. He's kind of given up. So, which we set up by how he talked to Melisandre, not wanting to be brought back and all that. So, Yolkboy, break this down a little for us.
Yeah, I thought that I'm no military man, I must say that. I'm just, you know, a casual viewer of military films and TV shows, but it seemed like Ramsay commanded very well, and this was his first move. He lured Jon, his big opponent, into the middle of the battlefield alone, where he was obviously unprotected and very vulnerable. It's actually easy to imagine Book Jon making the same mistake, remembering that he can act very rashly at times. For example, his reaction to Ramsay's provocation via the pink lettuce. So if there's a similar thing in the books, I could see Jon taking some kind of bait.
I agree, and it's not without book precedent. I mean, if you want an example of someone that did something blatantly stupid and suicidal with time to think about it, which Jon didn't have, Brandon Stark, Ned's brother, like, he rides to King's Landing and demands to the Mad King, who is known to burn people alive with very little provocation, demands that the Crown Prince come out and die. I mean, come on. This is easily worse than what Jon just did, because Brandon had time to think about it. Brandon had time to ride from River Run all the way to King's Landing, and he still said that thing when getting there. I mean, to me, that's just... It's also a parallel. You know, you've got Jon... It's a bit like a Stark, but it's also a bit like a Targaryen. He's got that fire. He's got that Dany temper, that same Targaryen streak in him, which I don't think that's what they were trying to show us here, because Jon's temper has come up before. But I do think it's a cool thing to point out. Now, those were actual horses charging at Jon, at Kit Harington. That was not CGI. That was really just, wow. He didn't have to act much. It was legitimately terrifying for him. So, now... Yolkboy, you mentioned military analysis. I've read a few different articles from people who are, you know, either in the military or are military historians, and there are some historical precedents for lots of things that happen here. There's some that are a little unique, but in general, a lot of it can be mirrored in real history. We haven't found any historical precedent for shooting your own men with arrows. Not a stretch for that to have happened in real life, but we didn't need to find a historical precedent because it happens in the actual books. Tywin and/or Roose did this exact thing at the Battle of Green Fork. Tyrion at one point sees a flight of arrows land, doesn't know where it came from, but he says that it hits friend and foe alike. So, kind of similar. My guess is it was Roose, not Tywin, because in that situation, Tywin is trying to lure the Stark men into a trap. And if he's pounding that area with arrows, they're not exactly going to want to go to that spot. So I'm guessing it was Roose, but it could have been both.
Father, like son.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Now, historical precedent for creating a wall of horse and man flesh, that does exist. Even one as tall as that one, which I was a bit skeptical of in our show review on Monday, but sure enough, there are actual historical accounts of piles of bodies at, say, for example, the Battle of Agincourt, famous battle in France, which there's chronicles that say there were piles of bodies as tall as a spear, and a lot of spears are taller than men. They're like 6, 7, 8 feet tall sometimes. So that, it's as crazy as it seems, that there's historical precedent for that. There's also stories of huge piles of bodies at like Gettysburg and things like that. I mean, it's not crazy.
Yeah, it's a small space they're all crammed into right there too, because you might think that some of those are larger battles.
Good point.
This one just doesn't have as many men.
Yeah.
But they're small space. I mean, we see it from above, and we see how crammed close together they are.
Yeah, you're right. That's true. Lady Gwyn, you had some thoughts as well?
Yeah, about the arrows. We see the difference again between Ramsay and Jon as commanders that was highlighted in their initial parlay. Jon, with Davos as his lieutenant, care too much about their own troops to risk a friendly fire situation. They're not going to use their archers. But Ramsay hurls his own troops into the fray, intent on building that mountain of flesh, even at the cost of his own men and their horses.
His goal was total annihilation of the enemy. He didn't. He wanted to kill every single one of them. And as Yolkboy said, it was a pretty good plan. It almost worked. It just, the thing he couldn't predict or didn't see coming is what undid him. Now the press, the huge press of bodies, which comes after this encirclement, which again is similar to the Battle of Cannae, except it was the large force encircling the smaller one, which is the key difference at Cannae, but very similar in that regard in any sense. The music, the desperation, the chaos, it was just incredible, really overwhelming, really visceral. Yolkboy, you have a lot of good thoughts on this. Take it away.
Yeah, I just thought it was awesome when Ramsay put his plan into place. The cavalry and archers created this huge scrum of dead bodies, as we talked about, and this was the reason Ramsay wasn't fussed about the friendly fire, I presume. And then we see the shield wall lining up with those huge shields. We see the confusion and helplessness on the face of Jon's army. And as someone, like I said, I haven't got much military knowledge, but I wondered what was going on. I was like, what's happening here? And I kind of shared the confusion of the soldiers. So that really worked, as a visual thing. They really communicated that confusion very well. Then there's this great aerial shot where we can see the dead bodies and the shields. We can see what's happening. Jon's army becomes trapped, and Ramsay's tactics were conveyed very clearly despite all the chaos. So a lot of points go to the director and his great use of that aerial shot. When the shield wall set the spears and started closing the circle, I thought it was really exciting and nerve-wracking. It was a great moment for television. And once again, underlined Game of Thrones as a groundbreaking production that's redefined what's possible on television. This was a scene that I think Hollywood would be proud of, on an even bigger budget. I think that if you saw this in the cinema for a high-budget film, you'd be satisfied.
Actually, that's a good point, because there's a lot of this praise it's getting, this critical acclaim, is because of the how groundbreaking the production was, what they did, what they were able to accomplish on TV. We could point to some plot holes, we can point to some inconsistencies, but we're book readers. We key in on those things, really, but the average viewer hasn't read the books or has read them once, and they're used to the plot holes in Game of Thrones, and that's just kind of how it is. We've taken that, we were used to that. So when they blow us up with this incredible spectacle, everyone takes notice. All the fans of all walks of life, people who haven't read the books, etc. This is what they're keying in on, the incredibleness of it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they did such a great job conveying the panic of the under-armored men pressed in on all sides, and the stampede to escape in the only direction available, which was over that growing mountain of bodies, with the enemy Umbers waiting on the other side to stop them. And Jon's near suffocation in the press and then in the resulting stampede was conveyed with great effect. They switched to this kind of point of view camera angle, which made his panic and confusion feel very real.
Yeah, the filmmaking and the cinematography in this was spectacular, in this episode in particular. Maybe, I think, the best Game of Thrones has ever had. But yeah, that press in particular was, visceral. You felt claustrophobic during it. You felt buried. And as Kit Harington said in one of the Inside the Episode videos, he said that this was a rebirth for Jon, and he actually compared it visually to the Dany scene where she's being lifted up by the slaves in Meereen, and it is very similar, but visually very the opposite of each other, obviously, and what's happening. And I thought that was a pretty interesting comparison. But read Jon's mental state. Before we were thinking there'd be a significant difference between Jon before and after his resurrection, and it was, he wasn't much of a difference. I think that there's an argument that there's some difference between him. He's just been lifeless. He's, doesn't have a goal. He doesn't have a mission.
Arguably, that's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's what I mean. There was that difference, but I think that this again, I find myself hoping that we see a difference between Jon before and after this traumatic battle. And I think that one of these things is, yeah, it puts the fire of life back into him, that it, gives him his motivation back, and I mean,
he decides he wants to be alive after all.
Yeah,
he's like, he's struggling, he's being trampled, he's struggling to breathe. If he doesn't have a will to live, he's not going to fight his way out of that.
But he fought his way out, and so I think that shows a difference in his mental state there. But I don't really expect to see him like riddled with PTSD after this. But I think it's pretty easy to imagine Jon or anyone having some claustrophobia after being almost suffocated by dead bodies.
Wow,
and I could see Jon in a situation where he's a little uncomfortable there. And I think that Sansa and Jon will have a little more in common to bond over. Not a great thing to bond over, but they both have been through situations that Ramsay has engineered.
Maybe he'll like standing on top of the wall again. It's the vast and open space, just like, look at this everything. It's so open and wide and tall, and there's no congestion at all up here. I'm going to stay up here forever. So within the Battle of the Bastards, we got a sub-battle, the Battle of the Beards. The Umber Sigil is a giant, and Tormund's Giant's Bane for the win. Taking him down there. Some people thought it would have been fitting for 1-1 to take out Small John Umber there, but this works really well too. So yeah.
I thought it was great. After Rickon's death, my bloodlust was at an all-time high. So I found it very satisfying to see the end of Small John Umber, who gave Rickon to Ramsay. So I wondered if any of you guys noticed that Small John and Ramsay had a similar end. They both had their throats torn out by a beast.
Cool. That's cool. Yeah.
I was actually reading just before this about a real-life historical parallel to that there was an actual battle where someone, it was a top Reddit post on our Song of Ice and Fire. Anyways, it was someone actually got their throat ripped out in battle. By someone documented.
Yeah.
But it was definitely...
Damn. Yeah, people do desperate things in battle. You use whatever weapons you have. And that's speaks more to the desperation of the scene. They're jammed close together. Small John at one point tries to swing his sword at Tormund, and it's awkward. And it's supposed to be awkward because he doesn't have room to swing it. The only thing he can do is a short, overhanded slash, and Tormund has no problem blocking it. And then their weapons are just useless at that point until Tormund pulls his little bone knife thing out that he slams him in the face with. That was really brutal. But yeah, it just spoke more to the desperation and chaos and brutality and the horror of war. You also get maybe something that we didn't get that we wanted was in the Riverland scene, Septon Ray talking about the horrors of war, because that's a big theme of A Feast for Crows. Well, we didn't get him talking about that nearly as much as we wanted to, but we saw it here in this battle. They definitely showed scenes of desperation, a guy with his guts hanging out, screaming for help, and a lot of people, a guy with his legs cut off, and all this just really terrible stuff. And that's the point. War is awful. Battle is horrible, and there's no sugarcoating that. So I'm glad that they showed it visually since they didn't have a speech about it. So that was kind of cool. Kind of cool how brutal and awful it was. That's really cool. So
kind of.
So yeah, kind of.
Not really.
So let's talk about the arrival of the Vale Knights. This was obviously we expected it. Nobody was like, "Oh my goodness, the Vale Knights coming to save the day." No one saw that coming. Yolkboy, talk to us about this.
Yeah, last week actually, I said that I really hoped that the Knights of the Vale weren't going to swoop in at the last minute and save the day, and I thought that this notion was too predictable, cliche, and I wanted to see something more complex maybe. However, it did come to pass. The Knights of the Vale came in as many people had predicted. And so I guess the question for those of us with a critical eye is, do we give the show a pass for giving a quick and easy solution here? In my opinion, I personally do give them a pass. I think the battle was groundbreaking TV, like I said, and that they've kind of earned a pass to do something a bit more simplistic. Some people are calling this a Deus Ex Machina. It's in fact not a Deus Ex Machina because it was set up and telegraphed clearly in earlier episodes, and so it didn't come out of nowhere. It was actually projected. So really the main criticism is that it's a predictable and well-worn ending to a battle. But personally, it's not one that damaged my enjoyment of the sequence too much.
Yeah, definitely not mine either. I loved seeing those banners flying as the cavalry arrived. I stood up and cheered, jumping up and down,
Nice.
literally.
How fun would it be to be that guy, the Veil Knight in the front, that was just like holding the banner, like
Yeah.
he looked like he was having a good time.
Yeah. You know, I would point out that this is actually quite similar to Tywin arriving at the Blackwater, swooping in, Stannis arriving at the wall during the Wildling attack. It's a well-worn trope. It's one that we see used frequently in storytelling. It's in books, fantasy classics such as Lord of the Rings, The Wheel of Time has it, even Harry Potter has it at the end. Films as wide-ranging as Star Wars and Saving Private Ryan. It's all over the place.
It didn't ruin those movies.
It didn't, right. These are all good things. I'm not talking about, you know, chunky things that no one likes. These are very popular films and books, so I don't think it was out of place. I just thought it was enjoyable and stirring. And by the way, we expect something very like this is going to happen in the books as well. We commented on that in our episodes on the North and Littlefinger, so something I'm looking forward to seeing.
Something vaguely similar, I agree. Something similar like that could happen in the books. We're waiting to see how that will be set up in the books, but I agree, it's a very possible endgame.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this scene I thought had great acting from all. I mean, the whole episode does, but I particularly like this scene in the reactions to the Veil Knights returning. Ramsay gets this sour look on his face, which is, you know, pretty satisfying to see Ramsay not with a big grin on his face, happy with the situation.
Yeah.
But when Jon chases after Ramsay, which is a funny shot as well, the three of them, with one so large. But Sansa sees this. And she's a pretty interesting look on her face, I thought. It was some parts hope, and I think some parts resignation, and some parts fear, because I don't think she's let herself hope that Jon can just kill Ramsay here.
Yeah.
And I think she's like, well, Jon's just going to do that foolish thing. He might die right here, but I think she still has that hope in her, and I think that all comes across in her face and these mixed emotions that she's feeling.
I agree. It's even possible, and we'll get into a lot more about what Sansa's frame of mind and why she did this the way she did, but it's worth considering the possibility that she wouldn't have been disappointed if Jon died.
Yeah, I thought that too. When she sees that, she is a little resigned to, well, this is how it goes. This is good for me.
Yeah. So that's a segue to Ramsay's end, which Sansa's psychology really comes out in his final moments. But we'll take our mid-episode break first and come back to talk about that in just a minute. So we call it Ramsay's fitting end. It's been kind of just long guessed at in the books fandom that this is how he would go out, vaguely, in a sense, meaning that his dogs would kill him. The other parts of the circumstances is anyone's guess. So, Yolkboy, tell us what you thought of that.
Okay, Ramsay's death. I think we all wanted to see Ramsay go one way or another, didn't we? So
Yeah.
I'm very glad that there's no more kind of winter hell, as some fans have called it, anymore. The curse has been lifted. But the end, Ramsay's ending, I must admit, despite really liking the episode, this kind of caused me some cognitive dissonance. On the one hand, I was very glad to see the back of Ramsay. His ending was very poetic. Being eaten by his dogs is something that we've been predicting for a while. And Sansa being the one administering the punishment shows, in theory, that she's regained power over him, that despite Ramsay's threat that he's now part of her, that she's really over Ramsay and he's got no hold over her at all. However, Sansa does stay to watch Ramsay being devoured, and she does kind of get a kick out of it. And so I wondered, isn't this really proving Ramsay's words here that he'll be part of her? Because she's behaving like him. She's doing what he did to Fat Walder. You know, she's watching the dogs devouring someone sadistically almost, you know. So I don't think the writers considered this when they chose to have Sansa kind of watching on smugly, but I do think it's a bit troublesome. troublesome, and I think it would have been better for Sansa to unleash the hounds and then kind of just leave Ramsay to be eaten, you know, like she didn't have a care in the world. I think that would have given the scene a different tone, and Sansa could have had her revenge and been smug without this kind of element of sadism, which I was kind of a bit unsure of.
The filmmakers said, real quick, sorry to jump in, the filmmakers said that they filmed her walking away many times. So I think they definitely had a specific reaction in mind. So they wanted to take different shots until they got just the right kind of smiley smirk, subtle kind of thing going on there. I'm not sure what they were trying to indicate, but they were absolutely, they definitely took care with that moment.
Yeah, I read that too, and I agree with Yolkboy's point about Ramsay being part of her now in this sense. I mean, whether they intended that or not, that's kind of what I took from that. But I thought her watching Ramsay's death was actually a throwback, at least in the book world, to something we saw from Sansa in Game of Thrones. At the Tourney of the Hand, it says Jane Poole covered her eyes whenever a man fell, like a frightened little girl, but Sansa was made of sterner stuff. A great lady knew how to behave at tournaments. Even Septa Mordane noted her composure and nodded in approval. So she's not afraid to look away. And then when Sir Hugh of the Vale fell, brutally murdered by the Mountain right in front of them, it says Jane Poole wept so hysterically that Septa Mordane finally took her off to regain her composure, but Sansa sat with her hands folded in her lap. And this was the part I found interesting, watching with a strange fascination. So she's definitely got this kind of, not afraid to watch gruesomeness. I think there's perhaps some starkness at play there, something along the lines of, he who passes the sentence swinging the sword and not looking away from the cut, as Bran was warned by Jon at the very beginning of the Game of Thrones. But, at any rate, it seems like this hardness, for lack of a better term, was foreshadowed in her character. And getting back to Sophie's comments about it, she noted that Jon allowed Sansa to do this, so it wasn't something that he was on board with it. He recognized that she was capable of making this decision and deserved to be in charge of Ramsay's execution.
Yeah, there was some debate about that, whether Jon or Sansa made that call. I thought it was clear that it was Sansa, but there was some confusion amongst the fandom. But the post-show comments by Sophie Turner and Kit Harington make it very clear that it was Sansa's call.
Yeah, I think you guys both raised really good points there. I think it's a little of all of it. I think that she does choose a sadistic way to have him killed, and I think that does show that Ramsay's, in her a little bit, that he's affected her. But I also think that, that it is part of her character to look at what was happening. But I also think that there's another angle there in that when someone torments you like that, you wait to see them die. You want to make sure they're dead, and I think that's part of her happiness. She can finally breathe easy, sleep easily at night, a little more easily, knowing that he's actually dead. And it's like in any horror movie, you're like, wait and see if he's dead. Don't let him.
Yeah, wait till he stands up behind you. Yeah. Oh, he's still alive.
Right. Just when you think he's really dead.
In Game of Thrones, half the characters that are dead are still alive, according to some theories. So.
Yeah, with that angle, I'm very glad she stayed and saw him really die.
Yeah, we saw a funny meme of Ramsay's first appearance in season 7, and it was just a picture of dog poop. No coming back from that. Unless we see undead poop walking around. How would that even work?
Very final. I imagine like the little emoji.
Yeah, the walkers raise him from the dead, but this is all there is of him, so it's just white poo. Anyway, so let's talk about the battle overall. We broke down the individual sections, but we could talk about it at a high level. Speaking of at a high level, one nice parallel between the two battles was the arrow flight versus the trebuchet flight. It was like a GoPro shot where we got to see the full arcing shot of one of each, and I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, they had a lot of really great POV perspective shots in both battles from the trebuchets and the arrows in the north, and I'm a big fan of those style of shots in general. And it was really great just when you start out the episode with the Myronese ship sending it off, which was great filmmaking. But they also had a lot of stunning vistas with wide open spaces from marine up high, seeing the destruction. Definitely just really wide screen shots, and that was true again with the distance between the two battles and when they're doing their diplomatic meaning.
Yeah, totally.
Marine looked fantastic from above, didn't it? When the fireballs were hitting the pyramid, like you say, it's the perfect shot to really capture the battle.
Yeah,
and they used similar kind of aerial shots, which I said kind of informed the viewer what was actually going on in the scrum and stuff like that.
Yeah, and this is one of the advantages of TV. I mean, George could describe those pyramids, those fireballs, as beautifully as he can, and he's amazing at doing that. But nothing really compares to seeing it on screen. It's just a totally different game. It's the advantage TV has, where the books have the huge advantage of being able to see inside characters' heads and explain their thoughts, which is just a totally different thing. So, they both have their advantages, and this really, the show shows its advantage as well in episodes like this. Of course, there's nothing really like this, but. It's, we've seen things similar with less scale. Now, as far as the weaponry, it's interesting to look at some of the choices they made there. The Bolton infantry is a lot like some sort of pseudo-Greek Macedonian phalanx with Roman-sized shields or perhaps more ancient Greek shields. Now, one guy holding the shield without a weapon, that's kind of unique. I don't think there's a lot of precedent for that. Usually the Macedonians and Greeks would hold a shield in one hand and the spear in the other. So that, but they had the same kind of. The spears had the same back end with the big counterbalance weight so that it's not all bulky and heavy. So I thought that was really nice. There's a lot of other analysis out there about the weapons choices and some of the costuming and how they did. I highly recommend some of the behind-the-scenes videos, the making of, all the things they did with that. There's a lot of great things out there to view on that, so we won't get too deep into that. There's also a lot of great articles out there, people who know more than we do about military history that have analyzed the specific weaponry used.
As an aside, I kept thinking that this should just be the Battle for Winterfell. I hated the name, the Battle of the Bastards. It's my least favorite of all the Game of Thrones episode titles. But
best episode, worst title.
It's got Marine in it, and those masters were some real bastards. So it's a fitting title, I think. Battle for Winterfell would not have worked for the Marine plotline.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. So
they were bastards. You agree? Huh?
yes, I do. So as far as Jon goes, this is one thing that I've been wanting to say for a while, and I haven't necessarily had the best place to put it. I think it fits really well here. Jon is a hero trope in the show. He's not really that in the books, and this is a good place to talk about that distinction. George R. R. Martin breaks a lot of fantasy tropes. To be fair, he uses a lot of them as well. He doesn't break all of the tropes. He just breaks a lot of them. Some of them he fully embraces. The show can't break as many tropes as George does because it's just easier to do that in books. You can be more courageous, so to speak, with your writing. That you don't have to please a TV audience. Books, you just have more leeway to do what you want. So I'm not saying George didn't make good choices. Far from it. I'm just saying the show can't take as many chances as George can. They just can't break all the tropes that he does. So they have to back off on some of those. So they went with the hero trope with Jon, and that they've been doing that the whole time. Of course, George can also take 5 to 6 years to put out a book if he wants. He has done that several times already. The show has to... the show is already working on Season 7, and we haven't even seen all the episodes. That's how tightly packed their schedule is, how much work they put in. It's really insane how much effort this takes, and I have to... I criticize the show plenty, less than a lot of people, but I still criticize it. But you just got to keep that in the back of your mind, how hard it is for them to do this, and their time constraints, and how much of a factor that is. The ages of the characters, of the actors, rather, that's a huge factor. I mean, look at how big Rickon and Bran have gotten, and that's just, they're supposed to be younger than that, but what are you going to do?
when Ramsay called Rickon little man, he looked like...
Art Parkinson's taller than you and Rian. Yeah, who's little? He's way taller than you, dude. Yeah, that was really bad. So none of this, you can't just say this makes the show better because they have less time. It doesn't make it better. It just makes it understandable that they have these conflicts or these constraints. And you kind of can give them a pass on some things because they're on this insanely tight, difficult schedule. It's good perspective to have. It doesn't change. It doesn't mean you should appreciate the show more, but it definitely has that effect on me.
Yeah, I will note that as TV gets better and better quality with huger productions, tons of shows are now they're not keeping themselves to a year between every season. They're doing a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And that's reasonable. It's disappointing to the fan to have to wait 2 years for a new episode of, like, Humans, the sci-fi show, but they don't have HBO's budget. HBO has multiple teams working, but they still only have 2 showrunners, and they get run through the ringer right there.
Yeah, you can tell they're tired, and I don't blame them. I mean, damn, this is hard. I mean, they're going to be able to sit back, when they're done, they're going to sit back and take a look at this amazing thing we've created. They'll be able to reap the rewards for the rest of their lives, but they still got a lot of work to do. But most of it's done. Yeah, so I like to think about that. Just imagine what the books would be like if George just had to put a book out every 2 years. If he was just forced to. Like, didn't matter. He just is under that kind of constraints. Of course, we're all glad he's not. I think the quality would still be very good. It'd be great. It might still be, amazing. But it would take a hit. The quality would take a hit if he was forced to put it out sooner than he wanted to. There might be errors. There might be plot holes, which we see in the show sometimes. Those are the kind of things that they maybe don't have time to catch. Might happen in the books too. Anyway, let's move past that. Let's talk about the aftermath of the battle. This is really big. There's a lot to discuss in terms of where the plot's going to go now. We'll call these the Ramsifications. Hat tip to Maester Shane for that pun. Appreciate a good pun when I see it. It's not as good as R. Parkinson's pun, to be fair, but it's a good pun.
I liked how Melisandre looked very proud when the flayed man banners were taken down and she was up on the ramparts of Winterfell, because that was her vision coming true at last.
Yeah, maybe we're seeing. You're right. Maybe we're seeing her. Maybe her zealotry will return full force when she starts to, get it back a little bit.
Yeah, she looked pretty confident there. Pretty pleased.
Davos didn't look so happy at her. She's got that to deal with. Will she see it coming, that he's coming for her, and whatever he does? I don't know. But she saw it coming before. So let's talk about the deaths. We already discussed Rickon, and we expected it. He's been on our worry ever since he was captured, and that played out. Unfortunately, 1-1 is gone. We predicted that. We were far from alone on that. He was the top prediction for a ton of people. For budget reasons, having him cut made a lot of sense. Many have noted the similarities between him and Hodor, one giant holding a door, the other breaking it down, both in service of the Starks and in the cause of fighting the Walkers, kind of indirectly in 1-1's case, but still. So I guess the giants are all gone now. 1-1's gone. There's probably not a 2-2, the ballerina giant, or a 3-3, the fullback giant for the New York Giants, I suppose. So it seems very likely they're out of the show permanently.
Are they going to burn him?
I hope so. They do not want a giant white running around, or a white giant.
I also like burying it would be really hard. It's a big hole there.
They did a huge
smell
hole.
Of 1-1. I know they're not going to do it, but I would love to see just a little seed of Melisandre giving it a shot to raise 1-1. Like, I'd like her to just, when someone important dies, I'd like her to see if the Lord of Light wants her to bring him back. Like, what does she have to lose? But they're not going to do that.
No, probably not.
But she should.
That would be cool.
She should at least try Rickon. I mean, no one's mentioned that. It's an inconvenient truth for them, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well,
That's true. She should try him.
Shall we resurrect the heir of Winterfell? No, don't. No.
Don't do that. No. Just forget about it. He's got too many arrows in him. So a lot of people noted the absence of Ghost, which there's a plus and minus there. Of course, it would have been cool to see Ghost, but as much money as they spent on this episode, it's just like, where were they going to find the money to do Ghost? Apparently, well, and of course the good thing is that he's still alive. That's the silver lining, because you could have easily seen him dying during that battle. Apparently, the 1-1's death, in a sense, saved Ghost, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't that right, Yolkboy?
Yeah, this is from the director of the episode. He's called Miguel Sapuchnik. He says Ghost was in there in spades originally, but it's also an incredibly time-consuming and expensive character to bring to life. Ultimately, we had to choose between 1-1 and the direwolf, so the dog bit the dust.
Not literally, luckily. He's still alive, presumably, and that may free up some budget for him next season. Of course, they've got plenty of other budget challenges next season, but yeah, the way direwolves have been being killed off this season, it's almost a mercy that he wasn't in the battle.
I think they made the right choice there with Wun because it wouldn't have been the same battle without him. It was great seeing him in the middle as being the kind of one force of resistance.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, it would be bizarre for the giant to not be in the battle, but it's not bizarre for Ghost to not be in the battle.
Yeah, John could have left him back just because.
It's very easily explainable, but it's not really explainable why Wun isn't there, except if Wun said no.
Yeah. Instead of snow, he says, sun,
No.
and goes to
Yeah,
corn.
says,
no snow. Yeah. So let's see some other people that were missing that aren't dead that we guessed maybe would show up. We didn't really think the Brotherhood Without Banners would get there that soon and play a role in the battle, but we threw that out there as a possibility. As predicted, didn't happen. Brienne and Podrick showing up. Now that seemed like it could be a possibility, especially like they could show up with the Vale Knights because Sansa's going to show up with them, so Brienne's being at Sansa's
Seems like they
side.
got their letter, though.
Yeah, they did.
John referenced the Blackfish
That's
not
right.
coming, so
Good point.
implies that.
So that is yet to come. Maybe we'll see that next episode. Maybe that'll be delayed till the beginning of next season, rather. So other questions though. There's Ramsay's dead. Small John Umber is dead. Maybe Harold Karstark. I think he's dead too. The show didn't really put much effort into making his fate clear, but it seemed like pretty much everyone died there.
I watched it with subtitles on, hoping that we'd get like a Harold Karstark death rattle, type of thing, but no.
So you wonder if the show is going to address that issue of who takes over those houses now, especially in the case of Ramsay, because there's no Dreadfort Lord at all. There's no heir to. And Sansa even very directly points that out. Your line ends, your memory ends, et cetera, et cetera. So will they bother with that? Will the Dreadfort, will rulership of the Dreadfort come up on the show? Will it come up in the books? Almost certainly. George wouldn't let that thread dangle, I don't think. So, yeah, very interesting. Some possibilities like maybe Roose, so like what I'm saying is maybe Roose, Ramsay, and Fat Walda's kid all die in the book. So then they will be faced with a similar situation with the Dreadfort not having anyone to rule it. If they do go this way in the show, maybe we get a parallel to the books where in the Karstark situation where Alice Karstark marries Sigorn, a wildling. Maybe Tormund marries somebody. We predicted this a while ago as a possibility.
I think that would be more likely for the Umbers, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Especially, it'd be fitting for. I think it would be fitting for Tormund to get the Umber seat, considering he killed him, and he matches it pretty well. But I also think that would really piss off the other Northerners. So I don't know how likely I think that he'll get a title. Of all the wildlings, he deserves it.
I wonder about. You make a good point that a lot of the North might be against it. On the other hand, the wildlings fought against the Boltons. They deserve some Northern Lords might be like, okay, look, they earned this.
I think so. Whoever's wiped out, but none of the Umbers came on the side of Jon, so they just lose their claim if there's any more of them. That they could choose to do that.
A new lord like the son of Small John could be a decent guy, and he could convince Jon that he's a Stark loyalist, and he would have gone against his father if he could have, something like that. Who knows?
Yeah.
The show may not even go there. It's really hard to say.
I tend to think though about Sansa. I mean, she's the Lady of the Dreadfort. That's her title by rights. Who else would get it? And so that makes me think about, well, we can't help but think about Jon as the king in the north versus Sansa as the queen in the north, and whether they'll be actually meaning to go against each other. They do have opposing claims to each other, and Littlefinger will be trying to push for Sansa to be the one in control. And
that's a good point.
She has a seat, so at the very least, if Jon gets the king in the north and he gets Winterfell, Sansa has a seat. She can just rule from the Dreadfort. Maybe she wants to rename it or something.
The Breadfort. We've already got another alternate suggestion.
That's if Hot Pie got the title. But
it's a good point about Sansa. I mean, you say Sansa's technically Lady of the Dreadfort. Totally true. In exactly the same way that Lady Dustin is Lady of Barrow Hall, or rather of
Barrowton.
Barrowton. Yeah, I can't believe I couldn't think of that. But because she wasn't a Dustin by birth, but her husband died and there were no kids, so she's in charge. So yeah, Sansa, exactly. That's a good point.
And maybe it'll affect Sansa's push for Winterfell, whether she would or not. Maybe I think she would be more likely to if she didn't have a seat, but she has a seat, so really, really interesting to see what the political situation is going to be.
Yeah, I really wonder how they play that out, whether they're going to kind of gloss over some of it and just handle it with dialogue, or whether they're going to show things. Or I mean, they're going to be. I feel like they're more likely to do some of these things than not, given how the focus will be on the Walkers and the need to unite and fight them. And it seems like the Northern Lords won't just exit stage left. They may become more prominent in next season. So we'll have to see. Good questions to have up in the air while we wait for next season and this next episode. Of course, there could be some of that resolution next episode. Mm-hmm. But speaking of heirs and who's in charge where in the North, Sansa. Here's another major difference between book and show. Sansa and Jon both know that Bran is alive, and in the books, only Sam and Gilly know. Right, Yolkboy?
Yeah, that's true. And just to look at the show a minute. With the Boltons gone, might someone go looking for Bran, or could he just show up at the wall? If he does show up at the wall, after seeing some kind of RLJ vision, like the Bed of Blood, he can straight up tell Jon the truth, or the truth as he's been informed by the Weirnets. Furthermore, just to add to some of the dynamics you two were just talking about, what happens to the Stark family dynamics if he does show up? Because he would be the rightful heir to Winterfell now. With Sansa supposed to be playing the game, or at least seeming more politically minded, how is Sansa going to feel upon Bran's return? Are the Starks such a close-knit family that they're above a succession struggle? We're already being shown the leadership tensions between Jon and Sansa, I think, quite subtly so far, but I expect that to increase. Will Bran's inability to have an heir himself mean anything? So I think there's lots of really interesting questions that are going to arise if Bran continues to head south and stay alive, which I really expect him to do.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we have a pretty good potential parallel here, if so, because we have Theon stepping aside for Yara right in this very episode. Well, it happened before.
Absolutely.
And I could definitely see Bran stepping aside for whether it's Sansa or Jon, or I really don't know how to play out. But.
Yeah. Speaking of Bran's inability to father an heir, some people have questioned us on that, and it's important to point out that was never made clear in the show, as far as we know. Ned thinks of it in the books as Bran's unable to father children. Apparently, it's not impossible for someone paralyzed to father children. It depends. It's very rare, I guess. So we don't know for sure, but I think it's a fairly safe assumption that he can't.
I think whether or not he can or can't, it's just that his plotline, his arc, his life is not leading towards that.
That's an even better point. I agree. That is an even better point. Yeah. So... But we'll have to wait and see. It's very up in the air what will happen with Bran. And like you said, I think we all agree that Bran's probably not going to try to make himself Lord of Winterfell.
He's going to go be the Lord of the Neck. the Lord Consort to Mira. She's the heir now. Jojen's dead.
That's true. That's true. So here's another major difference between book and show, and something that could throw a major monkey wrench in Littlefinger's plans. First of all, we know Littlefinger was aiming to be Warden of the North, and that he's going to try to marry Sansa. That all seems very straightforward. Part of that hinges on the fact that some of his things that he's done in the past aren't known. Nobody knows about his betrayal of Ned Stark, except for somebody that might show up that no one would have seen coming, and that's Sandor. Hat tip to Sir Pogi of the North on this one. Littlefinger probably thinks this information is hidden, but Sandor was standing right there in the throne room when Littlefinger betrayed Ned to the City Watch. Ned thought he had the City Watch on his side, but Littlefinger sold him out. So did Janos Slynt there. Sandor was just standing right there for all that. And of course Littlefinger has no idea Sandor's even alive. So Sandor could spill the beans, and that could be huge. So I wonder about that. You guys have any thoughts on that, or is that just a...
Yeah, I love that idea. I can't believe I never thought of it. I think
good catch.
Really is, and Sandor is nothing if not painfully honest. So I think if you see him in a room with Littlefinger, you can pretty much count on that coming up.
Yeah, I'm wearing my Hound shirt, the Hound shirt today. I really need an S for the Hounds for Ramsay's death.
I wanted Aziz to incorporate props here, and I wanted to get a little Post-it with an S. Put it on there. The Hounds.
That would have been good. It would have been. I would have been interested to see if that would have stayed on the whole episode if it would have fallen off. Okay, so we have before we get to our credits, we have a few extra comments and questions that we thought were good, that are worth answering, that didn't have a specific place that we could fit in. So let's take our final break of the episode. We'll come back, answer those questions, do our ratings and our Patreon credits and acknowledgments, and then our trailer spoilery chat. A lot to talk about with regard to that. Plenty of big spoilers to come. So if you don't want to be spoiled, stick around a little longer. We're not quite to that point yet, but it's coming up soon. We'll be right back. Okay, a couple good watching questions and comments from Charles Lill. If you consider everything Jon has done, imagine how his legend will look from a distance. I like this idea. I don't know that it plays out a lot in the show, but it does. A little bit. Ramsay talked about all the things I've heard of you. You're the greatest swordsman of all time, etc. He's got a direwolf. He's got a Valyrian steel sword. He's killed a White Walker. He's killed Ramsay now. He charged the Bolton host alone. You know, from a distance with the rumor mill working the way it does, that's going to sound utterly heroic instead of utterly suicidal. He took Winterfell back.
With the help of a giant.
With the help of a giant, yeah, true. He fought with giants, alongside giants. He fought alongside wildlings. He killed Cora in Half Hand. He's one of the youngest Lord Commanders of all time of the Night's Watch. And then there's that whole beating death angle on top of everything. So yeah, from a distance, dude looks like an epic warrior, like a heroic figure, and he doesn't probably even realize it. He found out
about Ygritte, you know?
Yeah.
His lover died in his own arms. Just love her from the other side.
All the romantic ideals around him too. Yeah, it's a really great story. No wonder they've made him the hero trope, right? So also Daniel Christian wonders about Jon saying, "We'll bury my brother in the crypts," as a prelude to Jon going down there himself. A lot of people have talked about what happens if Jon goes down in the crypts. If there's some secret there waiting for him, or if that's more of a metaphorical thing. But it's a nice thing worth pointing out. Do you guys have any thoughts on that, Jon going into the crypts? You think that's just a... I
don't think we will see that. I think it would make a lot of sense next season for Jon to go down there if he learns about this in contemplation, but I don't think we're going to see it next episode.
Okay, yeah, because we do. It's a good thing to consider because we all expect R plus L equals J to be next episode in some form or another, so tying that with Jon, like, even if he doesn't know what's going on and he's in the crypt standing next to like Lyanna's statue or something like that, just randomly, it would have like cinematic meaning even if he doesn't even know what's happening.
Well, it would suit. Remember, Littlefinger was doing RLJ hints when he was down in the crypts by Lyanna's tomb. It would probably suit Littlefinger's plan to reveal RLJ to Jon in the show because then he's a Targaryen, right?
Yeah, it gets him out of the way as a contender for the North, which Littlefinger wants for himself. You're right. Yeah. So this would be a non-violent way to get Jon out of the way, because obviously his only other option is to hope Jon goes back to the Night's Watch or to kill him, which that's obviously going to be hard to do, because he already came back from that once. Moving on, another interesting observation. A few different people wrote us to acknowledge Sansa's wording, which she says no one can protect anyone, or no one can protect anybody, something to that effect. It could be foreshadowing for Arya and Sansa reunited, but no one is just such a common phrase. It might not mean anything, but I think it's a good thing to think about. It's a good thing to be aware of. It's a possibility.
If it was in the books, I would be kind of more intrigued, but I just don't have the faith that the writers think that deeply about things, whereas George obviously does.
I'm with you. I don't think I've been on it since the Arya not being Jaqen in the Faceless Man thing, but that burnt through a lot of my goodwill on conspiracy theories and foreshadowings, and I'm like, it's probably just what it looks like at first glance.
That's funny.
Yep.
Okay, so let's do some wrap-up topics. Let's do our ratings. The 1 to 10, on a scale of 1 to 10, what did we each think? I'll start. I don't think I started in a while. Maybe I have. It doesn't matter. I'll start. I'll give this one a solid 9. It's the highest rating I've given this season. It's not the strongest plot episode of the season, but as we've said many times, the plot was on the back burner a bit. There's still a lot of things happened, a lot of important things happened.
Just plot issues from previous episodes playing out here. It wasn't plot issues of the episode.
Yeah, the episode itself didn't necessarily raise new plot issues. The thing with Sansa not talking about the Veil Knights has been ongoing, for example, and that wasn't new this episode. So yeah, but I give it a 9. It was just so amazing. The scale of production means a lot to me. The amount of effort that went into it, I give it extra bonus points for that. So yeah.
So what are your favorite and least favorite things in the episode?
Yeah, favorite and least favorite things in the episode. I think my least favorite thing was just Jon being a little too lucky. I think he should have had like a shield or something. That would have explained him surviving the arrows a lot better.
Fine.
Oh.
I even told you before the episode, I said that was my least favorite thing about the episode was the fact that Jon didn't have a shield.
Well, and I agree with you. You're like, you're right. That probably
I should have gone first.
Too. Yeah. I stole your shield thunder.
Yeah.
And favorite thing, I'm not sure. Maybe... Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. There's so many cool things. I think the chaos, the scene after Jon is just the scene where Jon is just the horses are flying past him multiple ways, and there's just dudes flying off horses, lances collapsing, horses flying around. That to me, I think was my favorite. Maybe that's not a moment. That was like a full minute or two.
Yeah,
that's my favorite
that
part.
Counts. Yeah, that was
edge of my seat.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. I thought it was a little silly, like how extreme some of that was, but they were fast. Those horses were hurtling at each other, and especially when you see them behind the scenes and you see inside the episode, it's really funny. The horses are moving not that fast at all, and they just sort of gently get close to one another.
Rear up next to each other, you can see their training. Yeah.
But they do some of that movie magic to speed them up and make them collide, and so it was really impressively done. I think I'll just continue on with mine then. I give it an 8.5. It would round down to an 8 for me. Still, I think my favorite of the season. It has the most rewatchability for me. The fewest things that upset me or pissed me off, or it frustrated me. I think my least favorite thing was again Jon not having a shield, especially because he had a shield later when he picked up that Mormont shield. So
he dropped his Mormont sword for a Mormont shield.
Yeah, we didn't even mention that he had. Yeah, he fought with both Mormont shield and Mormont sword. But my favorite.
That might have made Lady Lyanna smile. You might have turned her frown upside down on seeing that.
That's funny. I think my favorite was probably the Dany Yara conversation right there, because I've just been looking forward to it for a really long time, and it happened how I wanted it to, basically. And Dany was clearly a little into Yara there. I think I saw someone commenting that she gave Daario the same little hint of a smile when he was being cheeky during their negotiations.
Nice.
And then Amelia Clark in one of the cast interviews said, get rid of Daario, bring on the ladies. So I was pretty happy with that.
A lot of people would agree with that.
Yeah, get rid of Daario.
And the bring on the ladies part. A lot of people are hoping for that. Okay, so Radio Westeros team, Lady Gwyn, we'll start with you. What was your rating and least favorite and most favorite moments?
Rating, I'm going to go with a 9. Good.
Cool.
For all the spectacle. Most favorite. This is hard, but I guess my favorite moment was the press. I just think I was so well done and realistic and well conveyed. Least favorite is hard, and it's funny because I'm going to go with least favorite might have been the shield. Jon did have.
That was
fairly unrealistic.
Where did that shield even come from?
With like you're catching arrows in a shield, like that. Just I was like, oh come on! After this really great, realistic, gritty battle scene, now he's catching arrows at point blank range in his shield. It seemed a little off, but I also, I was of mixed feelings about the Dany and Yara scene. I liked some things about it. I don't really like what they've done with Yara, because she seems almost caricature-y to me, the way they've sort of moved her character off in this direction. It's good on the one hand, but then I wish Yara was kind of being a little more real or believable.
Why not?
I think that's a good point. about that. I see a lot of criticisms and praise for Yara's sexuality and how they've portrayed it, and I kind of feel both sides of things. Like, maybe stereotypical, but also a little refreshing. I mean, she's pansexual. She's not just a lesbian. She just likes people. She's attracted to men and women.
Yeah.
And it's maybe more of a stereotype that she's just for anything and sexually up for anything and promiscuous maybe. But I don't think it's that much of a trope or stereotype, and I think it's more refreshing to me still to see a pansexual person on TV. So I think I gave it a little leeway there for that, and I think if it had just been Yara, the lesbian who's butch and wants to have sex with Daenerys, I felt a little differently maybe. But it was because Gemma Whelan specifically said out of in an interview she said that Yara just liked all sorts of people, that she was pan.
That's good.
So I think that affected my opinion of that scene maybe.
Makes sense.
I think she seemed. It felt to me like she came. It was to me, the character felt like it changed dramatically. Her attitude towards people, where was one thing to be pansexual, but it's another thing to just all of a sudden be acting like a lad.
I think that's the part of the case is that they didn't put the groundwork there for this Yara thing. You could tell that they chose this decision this most recent season.
Yeah, they threw in the setting up it with the prostitute and then just quickly resolving it with Danny. Yeah. Okay, Yolkboy, what were your thoughts on the ratings, least and favorite?
Okay, I give this a 9, and I just want to compare it to Blackwater and Hardhome, which I loved all three, but Blackwater and Hardhome I liked more, and I'll say why. Because I thought it had a bit more emotion to it, and it drew me in on an emotional level more, whereas this felt like a pure spectacle. Okay, so, but it's still 9, is still a very high mark. I would say my favourite moment was the claustrophobia of Jon under the collapsing scrum, and the editing where your eye couldn't track what was going on, and it confused your brain, and that made me confused. I wondered what was going on, and I felt like I needed some air as well, so that worked really well. My least favourite moment, I'm actually going to ape something Lady Gwyn said. The triple arrows in the shield at the end was just kind of like a bit unnecessary. Everyone just kind of stood watching. There was some archers there, and they're just kind of watching Jon do one more heroic thing, which I kind of felt was unnecessary and kind of broke the realism that we talked about. So, yeah, but overall, 9 is my highest mark of the season.
Right on.
That's so funny that you guys, we both had complaints about shields and realism.
Yeah, we had the same complaint, and not having a shield, and you guys complained about when you did have a shield, how it was used. So we're kind of on the same page there.
They
can't win, can they? They got shields, they got no shield. Sweet.
We're such critics.
I feel like if Jon had shown how good he was with a shield maybe throughout the battle by defending himself, maybe it wouldn't have come so much out of left field for him to defend himself there. Though it was awfully short range for him to do that, and he did lower it a little bit.
This has been a complaint of mine for a long time, the lack of shields. It's just, a lot of times in past seasons it's been bizarre that they just don't have shields, and they're going into like these huge battles, and it's like, where's your shield, man? Where's all your shields? Where's your shields, all of you? Why don't you have shields? Like in the Mountain and the Viper, like, why do they not have shields? Anyway, minor complaint, very minor. So let us move on to our credits, and then after that, of course, we'll do our trailer spoilery chat. So let's first of all thank our musicians, the History of Westeros Bards. That's Joey Townsend and Jesse Koval. We have another cover of the theme song we're going to eventually reveal. And last night, I myself was playing with a metal cover of it. I learned it on guitar, and I've got some ideas for that. It's David Beers, a.k.a. Lucifer Means Lightbringer, has been suggesting I do that for a while. And I think I might finally take that suggestion.
I think I do metal.
So, thanks to First Lord Cash Craig, Hand of the King, Lord of Mines, Lord of Makers, and the Black Pupil. Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire blog is our Warden of the West. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning is Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Lord John Reed of Castle Woodbridge is the Lord Borealis, the Light of the North, and Warden of the North. Lady Kelly McMath of Covington is Lady of the Villa Hills and Creston Springs and Warden of the South. Our small council is made up of Lord James Inkblade, the Scholar Knight, Master of Whisperers. Grand Maester Saria of the Barrows is Cinder of the Citadel. Lord Robert Jacobs is our Master of Coin. Rosie the Clever, who maybe should be Rosie the Cleverest, is Master of Laws. And Lord James Tuttle is Master of Ships. I will expect ships to become a bigger part of the story next season.
And this podcast.
And this podcast, yes. Our lords and ladies in their castles include Lady Direliz of Castle Naki, the Alpha Patron. Lord Dan of the Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell is Breaker of the Second Stone. Lord Skip of the Veld is Lord of Castle Ganges. Kabeth the Unfrozen is Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light. Gregor the Toasty is Lord of the Bread Fort. Hey, spot's open. Talk about renaming the castle. There's an opening there. Lady Alicia of the Greenblood, Alicia Everlasting of the Greenblood, rather, is Lady of Desert Rose. Geoffrey the Unflinching is Lord of Sand Lake. Lord Greybay is of the Queen City. Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate is Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass. Lord Garin de Haviland is of Devil's Hand Keep. Lord Brandon Slate is the North Hammer and Harbinger of the Old Gods. Ashlyn Winter is the Hawk's Eye and Lady of Castle Skyfall. Lady Mikkel of Moonacre is leader of the Werewood Protectorate Alliance, which is again is a Game of Thrones Ascent Facebook group grouping there. So check them out. Big
I didn't
group
actually
there.
know that.
What's that?
I don't think you ever actually told me that.
Oh, really?
I should join that alliance.
I mentioned it in a past episode, but I guess you weren't around. Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool, huh? Lady Cachon Vallant is of Swine Harbor, and Lord Barone of Hillcrest is Lord of the Halls and wielder of the Valyrian steel machete Everglazed. And we've got one of his theories coming up at the end of the episode here. We've also got Lord Alistair Whitaker, Lord of the Dawnhold. And, of course, King's Justice Sir Troy the Steady is still wielder of the Valyrian steel blade Fate. Our History of Westeros Kingsguard is commanded by Lord Commander Dubbington, the Red Bear. We also have the History of Westeros Night's Watch, commanded by Lord Commander George the Golden, backed up by First Ranger Fabian Flowers, the Bastard of Green Shield, and finally, last but not least, First Steward Dolorous Roenick Cantrell, wielder of the Valyrian Spoon, is dark and full of turnips. Yes, yes. Lots of fun titles there. Lots of ways to support the show at historyofwesteros.com, including Patreon, as I've just mentioned. But you can also access Amazon through our site, and anything you buy through Amazon, it attracts to us without costing you any more. So great place to shop while supporting the show. We've got links up for the UK and Canada as well as America. We're working on some foreign language ones as well, which is a little trickier for us doing French and German links, but we're trying to get those up. You can also check out our link to audible.com as the season winds down. We're all getting infected with show knowledge, and it's a good time to reset that and get yourself back in book mode. I don't mean infected in a bad way. It's just hard to keep the track of the two sometimes. Even us who do this like full/part time thinking about these things, it's still hard to keep track of all those things. So check it out, audible.com subscription, 30-day free trial, comes with one free download. If you don't like the trial, you get to keep the download, but if you do, well, you found something new to entertain yourself with. Re-listen to the books if you don't want to sit down and read them, or do both at the same time. Lots of possibilities there. All right, let's talk about what comes next. The last episode, full of goodness, 69 minutes it's going to be. Oh, yeah, real quick, don't forget, our Q&A tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard. The link is in the description box for this episode if you haven't already signed up. Even if you can't make it, you can ask questions. The questions will get upvoted. We'll answer the most popular ones, and this should be a good time.
I moderate, so if you want your question answered, you better be nice to me.
Good advice. All right, so it seems like a major part of this next episode is going to be around King's Landing. It certainly won't be the only thing, but it's a major thing. We get several shots of it. We get an up shot of the Great Sept looking down on the seven-pointed star where the judges are each sitting on one corner of it. It looks kind of cool. A lot of people getting dressed up. We see Loras. Well, Loras isn't dressed up, but we see Marjorie getting dressed up. Cersei's looking all dressed up. Tommen's getting his crown put on. He looks very Baratheon in his attire. Lady Alicia the Everlasting suggests the High Sparrow wants to emphasize that he's a Baratheon and push away that Lannister. Remember, people were wondering about that in past seasons, how they were talking about how Joffrey of the houses Baratheon and Lannister, which is really not typical. Usually it's just the king's house that gets mentioned, but the Lannisters were so powerful. So it looks like the High Sparrow might be trying to push back on that. Speaking of backs, we see someone walking out into the air, open air there, and actor Eugene Simon, who plays Lancel, confirms that's him. So we see Lancel briefly as well. That's not a surprise in general. But do you guys have any predictions for this plot line, or have we? I think we mostly covered what we expect to happen. Some sort of wildfire thing. We've got our worries of the week coming up in a minute. We could talk about who we think might live through this and who we think won't. But yeah, there's a lot of questions. You guys have anything to add to that? Not right now. Yeah. Okay. I guess we have covered it pretty well to this point. So we'll just be waiting and then reacting to it afterwards. Get ready for potential wildfire, people burning, the death of the High Sparrow maybe, and others. But we also have Dany and Dario. This calls back to what you said about Dany and Dario. Emilia Clarke saying, "Get rid of Dario, bring on the women."
I do wonder what their conversation's going to be about.
Yeah. What's Michael Huisman going to be like? Well, get rid of me. What are you talking about?
Dario's going to stay and lead Marine.
Dario's going to be the one left behind to control Marine. There you go. Leave Marine in the hands of a sellsword. We also have Dany and Tyrion sitting together on the steps. It's kind of like they're having a real heart-to-heart or something. And he says, "You're in the great game now." Apparently in response to "Are you scared?" But that might be a little editing trick there. But I think so. I think that's what's being said there. So that's interesting. Maybe what I'm guessing, maybe what she's scared of is of what happens to Marine after she leaves. That's my best guess. She's worried about leaving it all behind and the slavers coming back or something like that. She won't be able to protect them. She'd be so far away. It's only her threats that maybe will hold them in place. And we'll have to see if that'll be enough. Now, Bran. We got a quick shot of Bran. And so we know he's going to be in the episode. Lady Gwyn, you have some thoughts on this?
Well, yeah, and we also know we've talked about Mid-Ned being in episode 10. So I think what's on a lot of people's minds is how can they avoid some sort of RLJ reveal this season after all the setup and bringing back all the hints from previous seasons. It seems like they've kind of everything has led to this moment that we hope is coming next episode. If it doesn't, I can't see how it's not just going to make their job so much harder next year if they pass on it here.
I agree. Yeah, that's very
I think
true.
yeah, we will see the Tower of Joy. I like the thought that it's an iconic line. "Promise me, Ned." But only Cat was an iconic line too. And he said, "You're only your sister."
Yeah,
and I like, "Promise your sister, Ned. Promise me, Ned."
Lyanna's going to be speaking in third person. So I agree with you guys. It seems it's super likely. Not only that, but on Twitter we saw Eddie Eyre, who again played Sir Gerald Hightower. He tweeted, "Lots of people asking me about the Tower of Joy scene in the final episode, but my lips are sealed." Well, you just gave away that there's a Tower of Joy scene in the final episode. But we knew that already from other spoilers. But I thought that was kind of funny. It's you, even by saying I'm not going to spoil it, you still kind of spoil it, but in a very vague and not very specific way. So I hardly call that a spoiler. It's more a tease than anything. So we also have a shot of Jaime and Lord Walder. Walder is toasting the room, saying the Lannisters and Freys send their regards. Who are they sending them to? I wonder, and I really wonder, how the scene is going to go, and why is Jaime even going there? We see a shot from Watchers on the Wall that posted their images, stills from the upcoming episode, and most of them are similar to what's in the scene in the trailers, but this image is different. It shows Jaime and Bronn, an army marching, I assume, away back to King's Landing, but it could be them marching to the Twins. So both of those are. I lean towards marching to King's Landing, but I
lean towards the Twins.
Okay, so neither of us is super confident on that. I guess it's very strong possibilities. Now, Yolkboy, you have an idea?
Yeah, I think this is an idea that quite a few people have had, and it might just be wishful thinking. But wouldn't it be nice if Arya showed up to give Walder Frey a good needling? Like I said, it's wishful thinking, but it's not like out of the realms of possibility. But
Yeah.
I'm not going to kind of hold my hopes up too much.
It's confirmed that there is an Arya scene in the Riverlands, though, right? Still, is
Yes.
that correct?
Yeah.
So we don't know where it takes place, but it could very likely take place here, so that would be all
I
one
think
scene.
so. I'm trying not to get my hopes up for things in general, but I just think it's really likely.
Yeah, I definitely agree. As far as yes, what's that, Lady Gwyn?
I was just gonna say I've been holding out for this all season.
Oh, cool.
I thought it might come sooner.
Well, as far as what Jaime and Lord Walder could be discussing, because they won't be discussing Arya. Although it's interesting to note if Arya somehow pops up and kills Lord Walder, and it's kind of far-fetched for Jaime to see that, to know that it's Arya. But that would be interesting if Jaime discovers Arya's presence somehow. Seems unlikely, though. But one thing that they could be discussing is the situation in the north. Like this, people are going to hear about what happened, and Lord Walder, for all we know, hasn't heard what happened to his daughter. Is that his granddaughter or his daughter? I forget. Anyway, his kin, Fat Walda. So he might hear about the Vale Knights going north. He might hear about Jon Snow and Sansa. You might hear about Bolton. You might hear about all these things, and Jaime doesn't necessarily know these things either. So big open questions there. Very curious whether they'll even bring that up.
Yeah, we have another really interesting scene between Jon and Sansa where they say that they have to trust each other. They have so many enemies now. And for me, I see it as them having a conversation, reflecting on their childhoods. They're back in Winterfell. It would be weird for them not to be contemplative about what it was like back then. And I could we have so many enemies now.
Yeah.
Whereas 'cause otherwise it would seem weird for them to say now because they have fewer enemies now.
Well, maybe they have more. I was thinking about that, and I could see how he might think they have more. I can also see I think they have less because if the South is now an enemy, that wasn't necessarily the case before.
If they've learned that. But
Yeah.
I still lean towards them just saying now, as in compared to 4 years ago.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that too. I can see it either way. We'll have to see the rest of the context of that conversation, but it also seems very likely that they're going to bring up, why didn't you tell me about the Vale Knights? And that would be like, why? That might be what spurs the conversation in the first place. Yeah. But here's another interesting reveal. Shay, tell us.
Watchers on the Wall reported a while back that there was a character, Fletcher. He is a fat nobleman in his 60s. He has distinctive, rugged features, a northern accent, and a distinguished air. Our source says he has a stirring speech during which he unexpectedly shifts political allegiances.
The North remembers. Get hype,
So,
folks. That's Manderley, probably.
It makes you think, though, what's he switching political allegiances to or from if it's going to be in the finale? And it makes me think about Jon versus Sansa a little bit, but it also makes me think that it could be a speech in which he says, I'm for you now, not the Boltons or not the Lannisters. So I don't think it has to mean that, but it makes me think of Jon versus Sansa.
Yeah, it might. It might be related to the King in the North reveal. If Jon, if that comes out somehow, that would be kind of quick for news to travel.
Yeah, but so as you can tell, we think it's Manderley.
Yeah, so that's very exciting. We get Manderley action. Okay, so next up on the trailers, we have Jon and Melisandre and Davos, and Davos is just screaming, "Tell him what you did." So, Yolkboy, take us away on this one.
Yeah, this is very interesting. The fact that Davos is confronting Mel is something that we've talked about before and expected to come to fruition. But I think it's the addition of Jon in the equation that makes this really intriguing. Jon wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for Mel. He might feel that he owes her something on some level. And she could also be very useful in the grand war to come against the White Walkers. But, on the other hand, Mel has done something completely unforgivable. So this meeting between the three of them looks set to be a really compelling scene. And anyone rooting for Mel should be very afraid for her future at this point. I think it would be a real shame if she's lived for so long, centuries or whatever it is, and is so set on facing the White Walkers only to die just before she can oppose them. But it's hard to see how she's going to get away with burning Shireen, especially with Davos acting as the prosecution. I do offer, however, one sliver of hope for Mel, and that might lie in the fact that she told Arya a long time ago that they would meet again one day. How much faith we should put in a Mel prophecy from season 3, I don't know, but it's worth bearing in mind anyway.
I have a little bit of an idea on this. Maybe Jon sends her away rather than having her executed. Like you said, he's got reasons to be thankful for her, and maybe he just wants to banish her, and maybe that sets her off on a path of discovering Dany. Because still, at this point, Melisandre having no concept of Dany's existence is kind of a dangling, plot line that needs to be tied at some point. That thread needs to be taken up at some point. So that's a possibility. I wonder maybe that could be it. I don't know how that would play out in the books, comparing it to.
I mean, I could see Jon just saying, okay, I owe her a literal life debt, like quite a life debt. She brought him back to life. I can't do anything against her.
Yeah, he might have to be. Yeah, he might just feel that obligated. It's going to be tough for him, I think, either way. Guys, let's talk about Littlefinger. This is really big. We have, not only do we all predict Littlefinger wants to marry Sansa, that's pretty obvious, but it comes up, apparently, is exactly what we're going to see. We have Sansa saying, "What do you want?" And Littlefinger saying, "I thought you knew what I wanted." And they're in the Godswood, and there's snow falling, which is a point we're going to get to in a minute. The falling of snow is pretty big, and of course the episode title is The Winds of Winter, so it really fits in. But Littlefinger at this point has betrayed both Cersei and Olenna, though he assuaged Olenna with Lancel. I goofed on that big time in the show only. I was thinking it was Olivar, which doesn't even make sense. Anyway, we all have brain farts.
There are people who still think it's Gendry. So.
Either way, he's also, betrayed Cersei, but he also took care of Roose Bolton and talked about Sansa. But now if he tries to marry Sansa, he's going to have fully betrayed Cersei, which is interesting because he's expecting her to name him Warden of the North because he got that promise from her back last season. So that's real interesting. It's really going to depend on who knows what about what Littlefinger's been doing, who has the information at the right time, and who can actually do anything about it. Because the South is in no position to make threats to the North right now. So yeah. Anyway, back to the snow falling. There's this shot of what appears to be a white raven in the trailer. A hat tip to McCall there. The Winds of Winter indeed are happening, and it's a shot of Winterfell in the distance, and there's a lot of snow, which there, as you guys know from watching the battle, there was not a lot of snow. The snow starts falling basically right during the final scene when Sansa's with Ramsay. When she approaches the dog cage, no snow. Some point during that scene, the snow starts, which I thought was a nice touch. So it's kind of setting up this next episode. So, yeah.
There was snow before.
Right, it just wasn't to this level. It was a lot more snow.
Yeah, but also it just makes good sense for there to be snow. That was at night, and that was during the day during the battle, so it would snow at night. It's just colder at night. Yeah. But
there's also, an upcoming, what we know is going to happen is there'll be a Sam scene, and this could be, they could be talking about, because the White Ravens are sent out by the Citadel to announce to herald the coming of winter. And so what we might see those two things tied together. We might see Sam's Maester scene, which we know is coming in some form or another. Him talking about winter, and then we see the White Raven, blah, blah, blah. That could all...
I think it'd be so cool to see Sam talk to the Maester. The Maester sends out the White Ravens, and then we get to, follow the Raven to Winterfell.
Oh, that'd be really cool.
That'd be a cool segue.
That'd be awesome. Now, speaking of Sam and Gilly, Lord Barone of the Hall suggests a Sam theory that I kind of like. He suggests, and we agree, at this part at least, that Sam can't stay long at Old Town. He doesn't have that option anymore because he stole Heartsbane from his father, quite obviously. So maybe instead he'll either try to get someone to come with him, say, hey, I need a full-fledged maester to come back to the wall, I'm supposed to have a maester, and it doesn't now with Aemon's death. So maybe he, says, hey, get us a maester, and then goes back with that maester, or something like that. Maybe they even talk about obsidian and how important it is, and they could, in the books, there's a lot of obsidian at Dragonstone. Stannis mines a lot of it himself even, or orders it to be mined while he's gone. Maybe the show brings that back in. Dragonstone isn't exactly in the same situation it was in the show. It's much simpler. It's not under siege. It's, it's just there.
I got a little distracted picturing Stannis mining. Actually himself.
Now keep in mind that the Citadel, of course, I know a lot what you guys are thinking when I mentioned the Citadel and going north and the White Walkers, as they're very anti-magic in the books. Good place to point out that the Citadel in the show does not have to be anti-magic, or if they are, it could be toned down quite a bit. but they don't have to be at all. I mean, sure, they're not going to be like, yay, magic, but they don't have to be like, we killed the dragons. That doesn't have to be a part of the show. So, even if that's even a part of the book, so that's a conspiracy theory that's kind of widely regarded. I think it's got some merit to it, but it's certainly far from proven. Now, yeah, maybe we get so maybe this character that goes to the wall with Sam, if this even happens, it could be their version of Marwyn. You know, instead of Marwyn going to Dany, Marwyn goes straight to the wall. It's possible. Good theory. Varys, Olenna, and Ilaria are apparently going to have some kind of meeting in this next episode, and it apparently takes place in Dorne, which is very interesting.
What the reports were going back was that they were seen at the Dornish filming spot. So
we don't have anything new to report. We mentioned that last week as well. So, but we have nothing new to add to that, but just a reminder that it's going to happen. We are talking about Arya and the Riverlands. So let's move on to our last segment. Let's talk about our worries.
A lot of the characters in King's Landing, I think they might die or are going to die, but I'm not actually worried about them.
You won't mind them dying?
I don't care about Lancel. Lancel creeps me out. But Marjorie, I think she very well could die, and I'm pretty worried about her dying. Especially, I mean, we have Olenna to rule the Reach effectively, so we have our lady quota.
And Marjorie as well, you know, is Natalie Dormer's not like a huge actress, but she's, you know, on the bigger end of popularity, and cutting her out might save them a little budget, you know. And if they're going to kill her, it would make sense to do it in this last episode, because just like Lord Walder, if Arya does it, it would at least make sense for budgetary reasons, because then they don't have to cast David Bradley next season, which, you know, that just costs more. So, so Marjorie, good call, definite chance that she's killed. Now, here's an interesting thing about Loras. Loras is the idea that Loras could die, or at least get badly burned by wildfire, but surviving, that could parallel what happens to him in the books. We hear that he stormed Dragonstone, got badly burned by boiling oil, got shot by a crossbow, hit by a mace. Hat tip to Watchner Don Coots for that, because we always look for ways where the show and book can kind of, when they get off from each other, when they come back together, it's good to look for those opportunities.
Now, I want to
say very good opportunity for that.
That when Aziz says Loras was hit by a mace, his father was not abusive.
Good one. We can't ever let a pun slide when we see it. That's our game. Melisandre, we talked about the possibility of her being in danger. Littlefinger as well, potentially. You know, he's going to make his move, but Sansa's not going to want to. So I don't see her just killing him.
Do you think that we're going to get a wedding proposal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
A straight up proposal, and you're sure that Sansa's going to say no?
I'm not sure she's going to say no.
I'm not sure she's going to say no. I'm not sure at all. I think she might say yes.
I'm sure she doesn't want to.
I don't think she wants to marry him, but depending on how things go down, I could see her thinking it's the smartest choice for her.
Yeah, especially if she's...
I was just thinking about it, and I thought, you know, I can see it happening. As much as I don't want it to happen, I can see it being a forward move for Sansa in her Game of Thrones or whatever she's doing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, because if she's maneuvering, if she's making moves, if she wants to get primacy over Jon, Littlefinger is a good ally for that, as terrible as allying with him in general is. So, High Sparrow, odds of his death seem pretty high. Jonathan Pryce, another kind of expensive actor, so getting, that's another benefit to them taking care of this now. I'm not worried about him, though. Yeah, no one's like, damn, they killed the High Sparrow? No.
Some people like him a lot.
Yeah, some people do. Like his I mean, the actor's fantastic. Yeah. That's a good reason to want him around. Yeah. It does seem like they're going to have to move past this at some point, and this is as good a time as any.
No more monologues.
Yeah. Now, Kevin and Pycelle, that's another possibility. We've still got there's a scene with Little Bird stabbing someone that's been in the trailer since the beginning of the season. We have yet to see that. Kevin and/or Pycelle in danger seems not unlikely, so we'll have to see about that.
I wonder if Mace is still going to be. I mean, his son's in the trial. I wonder if Mace will be in there too.
Yeah, Mace is. Olenna's out of danger for now, but Mace, he could die too.
Yeah.
That'd be I like Mace of Base. I like him in the show. I don't like him in the books. He's horrible in the books. Yeah. I mean, there's far worse in the books than him, but it's easy to dislike him. So as far as armored and plot. Pretty much everyone in the north, besides the ones we mentioned, like Littlefinger, I think are safe. Like Sansa, no way. Jon, no way. Jaime and Cersei, I think they're safe too. Tormund, I think for now he survived. That's great. I predicted he would survive. I had him in my armored and plot episode last week. wasn't super confident, but I was pretty confident. Glad to see he's around. And I think everyone in Marine is safe until next season. There's like no conflict left there that's violent, as far as we know. It doesn't, maybe something will pop up, but they all seem safe. So, anything to add to that, guys?
Armored and plot is Arya.
Yeah, Arya, you're right. Yeah, I didn't even mention her, but that's almost as obvious as any of them, I guess.
I know nothing's gonna happen. Like, I don't even think we're gonna see the Brother Without Banners again. And
Agree.
Bran and Podrick, I don't know that we'll see them again. And I think they're
kind of
safe.
agree there too.
So, yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think it'll just be a lot of death in King's Landing next episode.
Yeah, big explosion.
And some frays.
Things will get
or
wild.
At least a fray.
Yeah, and some frays maybe. Yeah, or a fray. Yeah, maybe. Okay, so I guess that wraps up our episode. Once again, we'll be back tomorrow with our Q&A, and we appreciate all the questions that y'all have set in there so far. Definitely an opportunity to add some more questions and upvote the ones that are there. Thanks again. I'm sorry?
I just want to give a quick shout out to Urban Flower Pot who sent us a bunch of like fridge magnets or fridge sizzle
Friggles. Yes.
Friggles, as he came up with, and this Stark necklace, which allowed me to rock the Starks, and a Manderley merman tail. So I'm gonna have that for next week.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get the Manderleys.
That'll be great.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that. Yeah, we certainly appreciate feedback from everyone and gifts. Of course, we appreciate those too. So everyone, certainly feel free to send in your comments, questions, and concerns, and anything we might have missed. Put it in the Q&A for tomorrow, or send it to us via any of the other methods: Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, or regular email, westeroshistory@gmail.com. Thanks again, Radio Westeros, for joining us today. Lots of great thoughts, a lot of incredible insights. I think people are going to have a lot of things to take away from our review today. And tell us where everyone can find you.
It's been great today. It's very enjoyable. Find us at radiowesteros.com for book-only podcasts, or check out our YouTube channel at Radio Westeros. Cheers.
All right. All right, so on behalf of everyone, thanks again. Valar, Battle of the Bastardesses, Valar, Winds of Winterus. We'll see you next week. Get excited. Last episode coming up. Adios, folks.